I better take my time.
So I just traded closets to and I'm looking at my ties and I'm like, they're gonna last a long time.
Wow.
No thanks. I'm coffee out today.
How about some scotch?
Scotch?
Well, that'll do. I need a whole bottle. No sipping.
So I still have to use the car.
I'll be moving $60,000. I will put it in my car.
I've got to wait till we can manage that.
You'll forget it.
Tell Glenn to send Glenn a text right now.
I didn't even think about it until about 2:30. I'm like, hey, what's...
This week won't be
Every dollar that's invested in the program returns $900,000.
Planning.
Fred. One of our active meetings. Usually it's pretty quiet.
I am You know what? That is not entirely out of the question.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, I did just have a birthday after all. Seriously? I don't have time for
No,
this.
we've been down to Arizona.
Just need to start resting later.
Well, I can't exactly go sleep.
You changed your plans, didn't you, for the 30th? No. Well, maybe. Like that.
Corn ready.
Now that's counting husbands and wives. Okay, so
Here's Brandon.
that counts
Frank is down here right here.
husband and wife. Doesn't count, that's what it comes to. Okay, yeah. Yeah, they're coming.
He always gets it all done.
Did you see that? That thing looked like it was ready to tip over sitting on the Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you mean with, yeah, with, yeah, I just set it up that week.
Okay, okay. Okay.
Oh, man. Last time.
No, I guess I'm not. Someone was like,
What's that?
All right, let's get rolling, folks. Just take another moment for everybody to get their seats. All right, today it's the 20th of May, and is anybody going to the ski-to-see dinner tonight? Anybody? Dan is? So we'll try to get Dan out of here. I think it starts at 5. Is that about right? You going, Rob?
No, Commissioner, but I do have a presentation to make at 6, so I will be departing at about 5.
Okay, so we'll try to
We'll just depart at 5.
we'll just leave.
If it's
Whatever's
in the
left
middle
will
of
come
a
back.
sentence, it doesn't matter.
There we go. Okay. I can't get any closer without losing 20 pounds. So that's as long as it gets.
That was good. That was good.
All right, well, roll call. Looks like all 3 commissioners are here today, and again, it's the 20th of May. So let's get going with our public comments. And it's Terry Montagne. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Is it the granary or the granary?
Either.
Egg Co-op.
Either way. Well, what I want to talk about, here's the concept. Bottom feeders in the bay and belly feeders on Bay Street with the granary in the middle. And another way you can say this is vertebrates in the bay and inebriates on Bay Street with the granary in the middle. And the way this all started was this little article about the barge that had a tough time tying up on Whatcom Waterway. So it sounds like there might be a dredging operation in the future for Whatcom Waterway. I don't know if that's a priority of yours or not. But as long as you're dredging, I think you should take a good hard look at dredging right up to the granary and getting rid of that roadway and putting some slips in there and bringing some deep pockets in to walk Bay Street up into town. And while and if you're out dredging, I think you also ought to take a look at the bay. And there's an interesting article in the Cascadia Weekly, this last Cascadia Weekly, and this is summary. Early industries also dumped in a chemical stew of toxins and heavy metals. Elemental and methylated mercury compounds, chromium dioxins, and toxins, all glued to that wood waste. So the wood waste got there first, and then you got all that other stuff there. There's an issue. So my idea is, and I think perhaps at the university, they got a bunch of kids up there working on aquaponics. Maybe they could help you decide the best place to do some dredging and see if there is some way we can bring those bottom feeders back into the bay. This is a big issue. But key thing is that granary. Here's the idea. You've got 40-foot slips, and I think you can do it. You've got enough indentation there. The fetch from the south isn't going to affect even a 40-footer there because you got enough blocking it to the south. And the access to those slips is only through the granary building. And in the granary building, you've got a student who's there 24, around the clock, or maybe midnight to 8 o'clock. You're not, but the College of the Ozarks waives tuitions for kids that work 15 hours a week. And so the thought, here's a cheap way to maintain security and bring some deep pockets into downtown Bellingham. That's my speech. You can. And I think the biological folks up at the university could help with that. It's just a concept, and you go through that building, and now you're bringing people in as well who will see what we've got here on 40-footers who come from industry, who might have some ideas for us as well in the process as far as future port development is concerned. Thank you.
Hey, Terry, thanks for those ideas. Chris Grundberg.
How's it going today? I'd like to just thank you for the opportunity to speak, and just want to speak to the effect of the mortgage rates for commercial fishermen. I've been a commercial fisherman for the last 7 years, and it's put me through school.
Can you speak a little louder? I'm sorry.
Sorry. I've been a commercial fisherman for the last 7 years, and I probably know 100 to 200 other kids that are my age that have put themselves through college with commercial fishing. And I just hands down don't know any other job that you could do that. I graduated last year, and I'm 100% debt free right now. That is not the case for a lot of kids. And I don't know, I just think it's really important that we keep the commercial fishing fleet here and we take care of them, because they're creating a lot of opportunity for kids and a lot of people in this community. And, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And Drew Campbell.
Set my timer. Yeah, I'm Drew. Thanks for having us here. I've also been fishing for about 7 years. It put me through Western Washington University. I graduated last spring. Yeah, and I'd just like to speak in support of the commercial fishing fleet as a working man's fleet. And I agree that we should be supporting that because it puts a lot of kids through school. And I mean, that was me included. I graduated last spring, and I also have no debt. And looking forward to continuing fishing and moving on in other ways academically and professionally. I would also like to say that commercial fishing, like my job as a commercial fisherman, has affected me in a lot of other ways. I taught a class at Western Washington University last year. I brought them down on the fishing boat as one of our field trips. I took them around Whatcom County to other fishing locations. But there's a lot of interest academically right now as far as like local food and fisheries, and that's just increasing. I see that. And it's just really awesome that we still have, it's not what it used to be 50 years ago, but it's still a thriving commercial fishing operation. And there's room to improve on that. But I would like also to speak to the moorage rates and maintaining this as a commercial and as a working man's fleet. Minute 25 to go. I bent my whole studies through around fisheries also, so I ended up studying a lot of ecology and fisheries management, ecosystem management, and I see a lot of trends there, students wanting to move in that direction. So I don't know, this guy, the first guy who spoke about possibilities of cooperation with Western. I can also see that. I took quite a few classes through the biology department, and there's a lot of kids up there who love these kind of projects, and there's also a lot of us trying to put ourselves through school and beyond through this. So thanks for trying to help us maintain a strong commercial fleet and a working man's fleet here in Bellingham.
Thanks, Drew. I think you made it into 3. By the way, I met Drew at the Blessing of the Fleet, and he also has some pretty mad design skills as far as some clothing design. So, yeah. Mr. Jim Kyle.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Jim Kyle, and I like to say up front, I'm not representing any group here today. I am a member of the Marina Advisory Committee, also known as the MAC, and as you know, the MAC was assigned the task of developing a recommendation to help you work through the moorage model review. I was also appointed to the subcommittee for the MAC that dealt with that review, and I served on that subcommittee with a charter company owner, a recreational boater, and I am the commercial fishing representative, or I was the representative on that committee, subcommittee rather. Now when Dan Stahl introduced the subcommittee members at the MAC meeting last week, he called me a long-time commercial fisherman. And I have to admit I was a bit offended by that because the other 2 subcommittee members didn't get that same treatment. And they're not spring chickens either. But it occurred to me that we could have spent that subcommittee time working for a new rate class. I mean, seniors get breaks everywhere else. Why not? But that's an opportunity lost. It is true that I've had a long and satisfying career in the fishing business, and I've worked out of most Puget Sound ports during that time. And that experience, coupled with my experience on the subcommittee, has convinced me that Port of Bellingham staff and commissioners, both past and present, deserve a lot of credit for currently providing what Consumer Reports would call a best buy in Puget Sound moorage. And that's for all user groups, including boathouse, recreational, charter, and commercial fishing. The Port of Bellingham provides all these groups fine facilities at rates that are average or lower when compared to other Puget Sound ports. But this was not true 5 years ago when commercial fishing boat rates were the highest on Puget Sound, with the margin increasing every year. If that had been allowed to continue, Port of Bellingham ACF, or active commercial fishing rates, would now be 50% higher than the competition. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the commercial fishing industry provides around 35 to 40% of the economic impact of the Port of Bellingham. So here's a question for you. If you owned the Port of Bellingham, oh wait a minute, what am I thinking? You commissioners do own the Port of Bellingham, and so do you staffers, and so does everyone in the audience that is a citizen of Whatcom County. We are the owners of the Port of Bellingham. So let's go back to the question. Should we, the citizens of Whatcom County, owners of the Port of Bellingham, permit the largest single industry in our port to operate with a 50% competitive moorage rate disadvantage when we have control over that expense? The answer, of course, is no, and that is the reason that the Commission 4 years ago instituted the ACF program. The ACF program is not about saving a few dollars for owners in our fleet. The ACF program is about a vote of confidence. Okay, I'm going to short that and just give you the reasons I would like to urge you to pass the MAC recommendation or a facsimile. Very quick. First, it will keep ACF moorage rates charged to our single largest port industry competitive. 2, it will keep the Best Buy sticker on moorage rates for all user groups. And 3rd, it will raise the money required to finance the inner harbor reconstruction as requested in your memo to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Hey, Jim, I'm in favor of lower rates for seniors as well. And I'll bet Commissioner Jorgensen would go along with me.
I'm a senior.
Keith Johnson, please.
Hi, I'm Keith Johnson of Bellingham, Washington, owner of the fishing vessel Golden North. A month or two ago, I wrote you guys a letter about my otter trawl fishery that was blanket banned and zero tolerance by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And, you know, thanks for the response, which was no response at all. The last time I wrote you a letter, I got a response from Charlie Sheldon. Could you please support that fishery so that I could go fishing again? I mean, there are beds of flounder and sole out here that are like 3 feet thick. So you barely have to fish to go out there and catch fish. And they blanket banned me saying that these rockfish are endangered. Sorry, they're not endangered. And they're not endangered by me. And the Boccaccio rockfish, do you know which one that is? What the alternate name for that is? The salmon rockfish. That is the rockfish that never existed out here, other than a straggler fish that swims in periodically from the ocean. And that's the one they say is endangered. And in the last 16 years that I fished, I caught how many rockfish? 14 pounds. That's 14 pounds in 16 years. Could you please support me? What I do with my boat is bring this fish back, which is a food resource, and I'm a farmer of the sea. That's my farm out there, and I own the rights to it, and I would really like to be out there and go fishing again, because it's very frustrating to sit there with a boat that you've had in the harbor for 35 years, and it's like, sorry, you can't go out there anymore. And you know why I can't go out there anymore? Because the director of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife owns a charter boat company in Westport, Washington, and he doesn't like the fishery. And it's a total conflict of interest, and there's collusion going on, there's cronyism going on, and there is, let's say, elitism, all kinds of stuff. What it is on me is a punishment, and I'd really like it if you guys could write a letter and support the fishery, please, because I mean it's a traditional fishery. Who do you think of when you think of the fishery? I'll tell you who I think of. I think of Kelly Linville, our mayor, because she's Kelly Coolidge's. I think her dad is Martin Coolidge's from CK Fish. How much of this fish did they buy? Tens of millions of pounds, and now we're blanket banned and cannot go out there because we might catch one rockfish. And the only rockfish I know that's out in this neck of the woods of the 3 that they say are endangered is the yellow eye. So, you know, it'd be nice if you responded to my letter and maybe supported me so that I can buy fuel and I can do a better job of paying my bills, because that's the permit that I have. And my boat's from 1920, and like I say, I've been here for 35 years.
Keith, what was the date of your letter?
The date of my letter was it might have been 3 months ago.
Before January 1st?
No, it was in January or February, I think.
Could you resend it to me, please?
Yeah,
I didn't receive it.
Yeah, I'll resend it.
Thank you.
I have literally a book.
I don't have it either.
I've literally written a book in my letters to the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And this blanket banning, zero tolerancing, we're the dogfish fleet. And the sport fishermen have gotten so much benefit from us. That's the reason why rockfish and crabs and herring are out there, is because of the otter trawlers.
Thank you, Keith. Hey, quick question on your phone number. The last number, is it an 8 or 9?
3899.
Okay. He said that on me. Yeah.
Thanks.
Did you gentlemen receive?
No, I'm
Either
just.
of the commissioners?
I'm drawing a blank on it,
No,
but
I didn't. I put 4 copies out, and I gave it to the office here, and I just said, would you give a couple copies to the port commissioners and one to the executive director and one to the harbor master.
Well, we'll catch up on it.
What was the last name?
Johnson.
Keith.
Keith Johnson.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Keith. Matt Hardin. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Is it Hardin? Hardin?
It's Matt Hardin, and
Hardin.
not still young, I guess, not real old, like Jim. I'm here to represent the Working Waterfront Coalition, and we just really have been discussing, and we want to say thanks to the commissioners for continuing with the ACF program and developing that. So we see that as a real economic driver to bring fishing and support the commercial fishing industry, and we just wanted to say thanks. And we look forward to hopefully just seeing that industry continue to develop as an economic driver in Whatcom County. So that's it.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Milan Slipsevich.
Hi, fellow commissioners and board staff. I have here with me Fisherman Journal magazine, and I have copies that I can hand out. Here in Fisherman's Journal, Port of Seattle advertise how respect the commercial fishing industry that has a lower mortgage rate, 5% that competition has. And we have now decision to raise the mortgage and storage for active commercial fishing fleet. And 2% for the mortgage. If you raise anything 2%, people gonna expect and say, okay, 2% is not big deal, acceptable. But 33% for the storage, that is there from day one, just for active commercial fishermen, that is built, 2 first building by the cold storage and give to the port of Bellingham to support commercial fleet. And after so many years that port get that storage rates, you know, and have nothing pretty much in a remodeling or repairing the buildings, or just in the last year we have new electricity through the buildings. And 33% is huge. If you raise 33% anything, you're gonna see a reaction of the people, then it's not gonna go for. I mean, everybody, if you raise anything 33% is ugly, it's not good. And I recommended, as a leader of Commercial Fishermen Association with the 300 members, I recommended, let's go, we need a few empty lockers, because I checked the list and we have only 4 or 5 people that doesn't have lockers in that list. And we can get empty lockers for those guys, active commercial fishermen, if we raise the storage rate for anybody that is not active commercial fishermen, and let those people pay premium rate. That people, most of them, is gonna move out, and we gonna work together with the port, with our harbor master, that I think, from my point of view, is a great person to work with. And we can make that thing happen. We can get enough lockers empty for the new guys that is active commercial fishermen. And those guys that is not active, we can raise the mortgage to the premium rate to empty the lockers and keep that storage rate for active commercial fishermen low. That is the only good thing that we can say with our competition, that we have something better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milan. That's all that signed up. Is there anybody else that wants to make comment during this period? Okay. Did everybody hear that question? I know I'm hard to hear. Okay. All right. So moving on. So I believe we're on a consent agenda.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Any questions, gentlemen?
See if I had a mark on one of those, I thought. No, I don't. No.
No, I have no questions.
So I just had one comment on item D. It's the amendments to the remedial action MACA grant agreements. So in the past, I have not been supportive of the cleanup that's been designed in the Whatcom Waterway. However, this is shifting funding from that to other projects, which I'm very much in favor of. So this is not a vote in favor of the cleanup as been designed, but I am in favor of shifting this funding to Blaine and the other projects on there. So that's the only comment I've got. Nothing further? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 So also, out of respect for the folks that have come here today, in regards to our updated mortgage model, I'm going to move that ahead of our presentation about the airport master plan. So if Mr. Stahl could step up.
Shall I read the motion first?
Oh, sure.
Motion to approve Resolution 1330, adopting an updated mortgage model superseding Resolution 1293 and making the necessary changes to the language in Mortgage Tariff Number 1 and the harbor rules, regulations, and procedures as described in the resolution.
Thank you, Commission, ladies and gentlemen. My pleasure to present the 2014 Mortgage Model Review. Just getting right into this here. Okay, here's our agenda for the day. Commission took action on April 15th to give scope of work and timing for the MAC. The MAC immediately formed a subcommittee, as was mentioned earlier. The subcommittee, very early in their process, agreed that they would continue to work this until they could arrive at a consensus. Jim Kyle mentioned the individuals that were on there, and they really took this to heart, and that they didn't want to bring a recommendation back to the full MAC unless it was unanimous, and they were able to do that. That forms the guts of Resolution 1330, which is before you today. So there's kind of three buckets of issues here. The first one is this looming capital requirement. Can you hear me in the back? Is this working? Okay. The Inner Harbor, these docks were built back in the 80s. We've put a bunch of life extension work into those to kind of limp them along. That work has gone really well. RAS Construction was a big part of that effort. By the time we get to 2022, these docks will be 40 years old. We're anticipating that right in that neighborhood we'll need to do a significant replacement. Our engineering staff has done an analysis on that, and the rough order magnitude cost is about $50 million. And that was what the Commission wanted us to look at as we go through the mortgage model to make sure that we're able to respond to that. The second item on this list was the Active Commercial Fishing Program, ACF. The charge to the MAC was competitive mortgage rates. That's a term that means different things to different people, and we spent a lot of quality time trying to define what competitive meant in this context. And the last item on there is boathouse comments. This was not part of the official scope of work that the Commission took action on, but while you gentlemen were discussing that scope of work, you had a lot of public comment from the podium here about the boathouses and about the fire line issues. For the last year and a half or so, the MAC has had a subcommittee on boathouse issues. It's kind of transitioned a little bit, and it's not so much a subcommittee anymore as it is an owners group. We meet with a number of the owners of those boathouses, and that discussion has been ongoing. As the subcommittee was meeting on the first two items there, the capital replacement requirements and the ACF, it seemed to make sense to throw those into the recommendation. So that was a little bit out of the scope of work that you gentlemen gave us, but we decided to include that. So that is at your discretion as we move forward. These are the three individuals that were on the subcommittee. They are all lifetime boaters. Is that better? It's meant as a high compliment. This was a very dynamic group. These are opinionated, articulate, persuasive individuals. And these three guys went at it. We scheduled meetings every single Friday between the time that the commission set the curb lines for the study until they were done. These meetings were scheduled from 10 to 12. We typically went from 10 till 2. There was times that the staff almost kind of backed up from the table as these three different perspectives on competitive rates and on how to run the harbors were discussed and debated. There were significant data requests from these three to the staff. So between the one Friday and the next, we would go mine the data, bring that back to them, kind of put some fresh meat on the table and back up as they would kind of work this back and forth. Lots of good energy, completely respectful, but rolled sleeves up and a really vigorous discussion. There's also some real creativity that came out of this discussion. As the commission knows from past reviews, a big issue for us is the occupancy rate for the ACF vessels. These guys are working up and down the coast, and they're not here a lot, and that leaves open slips. And so that drives revenue down, and it doesn't make anybody happy. But if the ACF folks were here all year, then they'd be in trouble because they wouldn't be making any money. So the committee really put their effort into that, and they came up with a creative solution that Chris Tibby will talk to you a little bit later, called transitional moorage, where the ACF guys have kind of given up some turf. They've kind of given up some slips that have traditionally been assigned to them to allow recreational folks to come in. That those folks will need a little more flexibility, but it will raise revenue. And they're looking to the staff to make a more intensive use of the asset, to bring in more revenue. Full helps everybody is a phrase that kind of kept being repeated through the subcommittee. And it really was good work, and I'm hoping that you give it good consideration today. Okay. Inner harbor replacement. The task to the group was to come up with $2.5 million by 2022. That represents 5%, or essentially a down payment on the $50 million bond that we're anticipating in 2022. We went through a number of scenarios, and the blue line model that's in front of you today exceeds that minimum. You'll see a new line item on that blue line model called a capital replacement reserve. In the private sector, that would be called a sinking fund. So we've bested the $2.5 million minimum, and that's up to 3.24. So we feel proud with that, that we're able to put that money away if this is adopted. It's not without some pain. This is an awful busy slide, and the only reason I put this on here is that anybody that's got a boat, you know what your length overall is, and so you can kind of pick out your length there, and you can see your specific moorage rate, and you can see the specific percentage increase. This was the tableau or the scenario that was in the max recommendation. You'll notice it is the same for all vessels as far as percentage increase. Everybody goes up by 4%. So we looked at market, we looked at a number of things, and the conclusion that we came to is that we'll use the same number for all of the recreational vessels. I've got a couple of slides here, and we'll just do a market set for you to see kind of how that plays out in the real world. All of these slides will have a bunch of blue lines that are the competition. The red bar is the current port rate, and then the green bar is what that 4% looks like. And it's a little bit of apples and oranges because the green bar is our 2015 rate compared to everybody else's 14 rate, so it's going to be higher. And I'll go through these fairly quickly, but it will give you a sense of how this 4% impacts are standing in the market. So here's the 26-foot. When you get to the 30-foot, you see it moves a couple bars to the right. A lot of these market sets are relatively flat, so they're pretty sensitive to a fairly small increase, and you'll see that on a couple of these. This is, I think, the highest one. For the 44-foot vessel, it stays the same as far as relation to its peers. 56-foot, you can see our red bar almost all the way to the far left. 60-foot rate more in the middle. The subcommittee recommended that we come up with a new class in the moorage model. The prior version of the blue line had 56-foot and greater. This adoption, if you so choose today, would have a higher length category, 70 feet and up. We have a number of these vessels, and these are vessels that are very attractive to the local marine trades. When these folks come to town, they spend a lot of money on diesel and fiberglass and electronics. And we're doing some things in the harbor to try and make some room for some of these vessels because of the impact it has on marine trades. As we add those amenities to those folks, we thought it warranted having a little bit higher rate. So this is market driven.
Dan, how many of those, you said many, how many?
I think we've got about 10.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Coming out of the subcommittee and into the full MAC, there was broad and deep support for the ACF program. So you have recreational boaters in your harbor that are very supportive of having a working waterfront. You have upland tenants, whether they're in the marine trades or not. They appreciate seeing a vibrant, authentic waterfront where people are actually coming down to the waterfront to work for a living. The subcommittee and later the MAC really took a holistic look at the needs of the fleet. Most of the discussion in this chamber has been about moorage, but there's other issues that are significant. And the storage issue came up pretty significant this year, more than in past years. Part of that was some of the earlier MAC discussions. Then we also looked at some future capital improvements that are not solved by Resolution 1330 today, but it gives an indication to staff on where we need to look in the future. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pam Taft, and she's going to work through the kind of data set that we did on the moorage for ACF. I'll be back for the conclusion. Thanks.
So as the committee began working through the issue of the ACF moorage rates, we needed a starting point. So they had asked for historical data on what have the moorage rates done over the last 4 years. So we went back and pulled the data that we've had for ACF moorage rates from different harbors from 2010 through 2014 and graphed them. And as you can see on this graph, they've been pretty flat. So there hasn't been a lot of movement with rates in the last 4 years. Jim Kyle asked us to go back and look at what is the average percent change in moorage rates per year for those harbors. So we can kind of get a look to see what are they doing, what percentage are they changing each year. So this graph shows that, and in 2011, a little over 2.5% was the average change in moorage rate. In 2012, it drops down to about 1%. So the committee struggled with the idea of what to use as an escalator for ACF moorage rates. So they went back to this graph and thought, okay, let's take an average of what these changes over time look like and apply that as an escalator. And what that looks like is a 2% escalator for the moorage rates for 4 years, 2015 through 2018. So 2014, the current rate is $5.90. And applying the 2% escalator, then you see in 2015 it goes to $6.02, $6.14 in 2016, and so on. We add in the commercial or the commission support of $1.02, and then we have our full model recovery rate, as you can see, starting in 2015 at $7.04. One change that we are making to the requirements for the ACF moorage rate is the proof of active fishing. We require fish tickets, fishing license, and previously it's been over a 3-year period, so you can supply that documentation within the last 3 years. And we're going to shorten that a little bit and change it to 2 years. So to qualify for the ACF mortgage rate, then you have to supply that documentation within the last 2 years. This is a snapshot of market right now. What are the market rates and where do we fall within market? The red bar is our 590, our current mortgage rate. The green bar is what that looks like with 2%. Moving on, this is for vessels that are greater than 80 feet. This is the same information that I just showed a few slides ago, but for vessels larger than 80, and what that trend looks like from 2010 through 2014. And again, it is somewhat flat. The escalator that was determined by the committee for the rates greater than 80 feet would be a no increase for the first 2 years, 2015 and 2016. There would be 0. Starting in 2017, that 692 rate would increase at 2%, and that would be for years 2017 and 2018. And again, to qualify for this rate, the requirement is changing from the 3-year window to 2 years. So the documentation would need to be supplied within the 2-year period.
Pam, is there no commission support like on the other vessels on this one?
No, there is not. And this also is a snapshot of the market right now and where we fall within that. So you can see that we're on the more right side, higher end of the market rates. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris Tibby.
Good afternoon. As Dan mentioned, it's beneficial for the fishermen to be out fishing, and that leaves quite a bit of vacancy in the commercial fishing zone. So we took a look at that. Jim and both Jims asked for some data on that. We took a hard look at it. We realized from looking and crunching the numbers that we have an occupancy rate of 65% in the commercial fishing area, and that's what spurred on the conversation to develop some new mechanisms that would allow us to maybe bump that number up, whether it be fishing or recreational. Blaine will convert 15 slips from active commercial fishing to recreational use. And here at Squalicum, we're going to start the concept of transitional moorage. And how that will work is our staff will have the opportunity to call someone that's been on the wait list for a long period of time, offer them a slip that is now vacant, or a fisherman up in Alaska, let's say. This person that chooses to take that slip will then know that they will have that slip for the entire time that is vacant. When the fishing boat returns, the fishing boat will get their slip back, and the recreational boat will be moving somewhere else into the marina. That's why we only have 16 slips available to do that, because that somewhere else is probably going to end up being the guest dock, either at 12, 9, or 3. So it would be hard to look them in the face and promise them a slip if you didn't know you had it for sure. I think that does many positive things. It gets that glacial movement of that wait list in our most robust area of the 40 to 50 foot range. It gets that moving again, and I think that just through that encouragement, it'll spur some activity on the rec side, and it'll also help to bump up this ACF occupancy rate to more like 100% then. Also in the subcommittee, we did a lot of discussion, as presented in an earlier slide, about what is a primary driver and need for ACF. Storage is the big concept here. Web lockers, outside storage, common areas, and net repair areas. Right now, if you go out and you look over by the web lockers, you'll see there are quite a few people repairing and working on nets. So we looked at the web lockers by use. The categories are here. The primary user is clearly in this slide. You can see in the table, 86% of it is for the active commercial fishermen. This is the same information, just in a more palatable visual. The blue being active commercial fishermen, use of lockers. This sort of M&M display of colors here lays it out so that we can see where our market survey is with storage units and other ports, and also private entities. So all of the green bars reflect public ports that have storage available. You'll notice that porting Bellingham is all the way over in red on the left. And our next closest competitor would be Port of Anacortes on that. Fisherman's Terminal is more just right of center there. The yellow bars are the other rates, and the blue bars are private entities. So the MAC is recommending that the storage rates for all categories go up a nickel. That brings us from 15 cents to 20 cents at Squalicum on ACF rate, and 13 cents to 18 cents in Blaine. To be consistent with the requirement of 2 years recent fish ticket, we are going to keep that in place and also extend that to the eligibility for ACF benefit receiver for the web lockers as well. There's also a proposal to maintain that all the ground lockers be held for ACF who don't already have a leased locker. All of those have ground access. And it'll be up to the harbor master to make the discretion for the positive economic impact within the waterfront community here. Some of the outside storage areas that are utilized here, the fenced-in storage area you'll see on this slide is the fenced area near Sawanich Park. That's at 12 cents a square foot. And the areas that we have listed as common areas are also being utilized by the fishermen, and that is at no charge. Here's some examples of some of the outside storage. We are presently, as we speak here today, tagging items such as these boats, these broken down catamaran hulls and whatnot laying around in the yard. We have tagged that, and that has spurred a lot of passionate conversation within my office, I can assure you that. That's just what we're doing here. So eventually, you know, whatever doesn't get claimed or moved or removed, we'll either surplus it, sell it, or dispose of it. Some of the areas that we need to look at for future consideration, a net pallet stacking frame. It's kind of a sort of a wall-less pole barn, if you will. A covered seine net work area. There's been some great conversation I've had with Milan just recently about where that could be. Some short-term land lease for private structures, additional rollers for the Squalicum Sawtooth, and perhaps a new crane for the Sawtooth dock. Dan's up. Thanks.
Although this moorage model is designed for Squalicum and Blaine, it's also used to help us set rates down on the south side. We have docks down at the Bellingham Cruise Terminal, not the large berth 1 for the Alaska vessels, but berth 2 and 3 have smaller size vessels, and rather than have a cost model just for those docks, which would have huge rates, we've kind of just used Squalicum and Blaine as a go-to. So we've had a bit of an addendum in the model before. We're not suggesting any changes, but I wanted to call it out that it is a component in Resolution 1330. Boathouse concerns. As you gentlemen were preparing to have the moorage study done, you had a number of people come and give public comment requesting rate parity, square foot of water is a square foot of water. There was also a number of concerns that were expressed about the pending expense for the Gate 3 water lines. This is a slide that you've seen before with some current modifications. Why do we treat boathouse slips different than open slips? So the top part of that chart there really just talks about some of the differences between the two. If you have an open slip and you decide as a boat owner that you want to sublease, You are able to do that through the harbor office, but for a maximum of 12 months, and then you need to either retake your slip or you need to exit. You're not allowed to sublease that indefinitely. The boathouses can do that literally indefinitely. The second one on there is the waiting list. I think that's probably the biggest single difference between the two. We've talked with a number of the boathouse owners that started, that came to the community and that were lifetime boaters, and they wanted to have moorage in the harbor, and so they got on the wait list. And they were there for 1 or 2 or 5 years, and they got tired. And they had the funds, and so they were able to purchase a structure. So with those funds, they were able to bypass the wait list. We have people on the wait list. I think there's actually one that goes back to the last century. It's actually 1998. A lot of the folks have been on that wait list for 10 years or more. And if you have the funds, you can bypass that by purchasing a boathouse. It really is a unique situation in the harbor, very different than the open slips. Public access is very different. There are boat owners that come and say that we ought to lock the gates all the time. You ought to lock off my fingers so that people can't walk down onto that next to my boat. And the port's answer is, I'm sorry. Those slips are owned by the port. We're going to have public access down on the docks. It's part of our maritime community. And the boathouse owners can lock the door. I mean, they're able to do that. There is a note at the bottom, and I didn't see Fred Wicknick here, but the revisions to the bottom were point on for Fred's comment to me that the boathouses are privately owned structures in the harbor. And to that extent, the port does not use money to design, build, or maintain them. The boathouse owners have said that should be used in their favor to reduce the rates. And we haven't done that since the boathouses have been here in the 70s or so. But in fairness to Fred, I told him I would not air that slide without making those changes.
Dan, just a footnote here. They insure their boathouses themselves?
Most of them do not.
Most of them do not carry any insurance on their boathouse?
We are requiring them to now. They are not in compliance. And that's been one of the kind of the bones of contention. And what we understand is that most of them are not able, the multi-parties, are not able to purchase insurance until they form an entity. And
how about the individual boathouses, not the multi-parties? Are those insured?
Most of them are, yes.
Okay.
We've set a requirement, and those are largely in compliance.
And do they pay property tax on those boathouses?
I believe so. You also received public comment about the way that the port was charging the boathouses had changed significantly, that there was a new 30% surcharge. And this is a graph to kind of put some facts to that discussion. If you look at the blue line in the graph here, that is what a 40-foot open slip would be. The red line is what a 40-foot boathouse would be based on the charges, how we had done them since they were built up until 2010, and that was on the length of the boathouse plus half the width. And the commissioners, we changed our model back in 2010 to be more of a square foot model, and based on dialogue with a number of boathouse owners, we changed that from length plus half the width to the length plus 30%. They were meant to be essentially equivalents, so it's not a new concept, but it was a new kind of mechanism to do that. And when you look at this graph here, the dashed line, that shows the 30% charge as opposed to the length plus half the width. And you can see they lay pretty much right on top of each other. If you go to a different boathouse, this is one where this particular boathouse owner actually made out better that the rate was lower on the 30% versus length plus half the width. And part of this is a creature that the boathouses out there are not consistent design. It's not as if all of the slips have the same beam allowance. There's different lengths and widths. But the notion that I'd like to air out is that there's always been a boathouse premium. We've changed subtly how we did that back in 2010. This is a market slide on the boathouses. The boathouses have asked for the 30% to go away. The red bar is where they currently are. The orange bar is where they would be if that 30% were removed. So there's a number of issues that were causing some consternation to the boathouses. A big one was, how was the pressure line going to be allocated, the cost for that? That's a contract that we will come to you to award the bid in June, so next month. There was also the new requirements for the multi-party boathouses that the port had put on them. Port Commission, through a resolution, had said after lengthy public discussion, both at the MAC and here at Commission chambers, that the boathouse, the multi-party boathouses, needed to form some kind of an organization. They needed to get together and form a condo association, LLC, partnership, something. Port Attorney Frank Schmelik was helpful in developing some curb lines so that the port could say, here's our minimum requirements, but we gave them as much flexibility as we could because there are tax implications. There's other things that can be triggered by which kind of organization you choose. The owners were also reluctant because of the unknown cost. So the MAC subcommittee, as they were working through mortgage issues and costs, decided to come up with a recommendation for the multi-party boathouses as well. And the recommendation coming out of the subcommittee, which was adopted by the entire MAC, was to take the Gate 3 fire line and treat that the way we do all of our other projects. Even though the fact pattern as to the requirement for that fire line is different, it is a very unique situation, the MAC said, let's treat that like we do everything else in the harbor, where everything gets thrown into the same pot and everybody pays equally. Sir.
Dan, just while we're talking about this, I always like to keep numbers in mind. Yeah. I heard it was $1 million, and at the last MAC meeting it was $600,000 to comply. What is the number, best guess today?
So there were two numbers that are in your current adopted budget, and that was to do a pressure line, that was a port requirement, a standpipe, port requirement, and then there was a pressure line that was required for the multi-party boathouses. If you take those two projects together, individually, it's about $1 million. Partially at the instigation with this owners group of multi-party boathouses, we looked to do a hybrid design. We spent some additional engineering time and energy to see, with these two lines going down the dock at the same time, is there a way that we can do a beneficial reuse of existing assets and find a way to drive some cost out of it. It took several months to do that. We had very good cooperation from Jason Napier, the fire marshal at the Bellingham Fire Department, and we are we'll bring to you the bid results of that effort. The engineer's estimate, I believe, is $683. So by doing that value engineering, we were able to drive some cost out of it. We'll see what the market says when we open the bids. But a significant chunk.
So it's 683 now, down from $1 million, according to your calculation. And you probably went to the same school as Mike Stoner, where we don't guarantee anything in your shop.
Fred Shop will guarantee it because we'll open the bids and we'll see what it really.
That'll be the number. Market will be the number.
And this solution actually works well with that, because it's not as if today we're coming up with some kind of assessment to charge people when we don't know what the bid number is.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Yep. The second part of this is a caveat, and this was a very strong, visceral reaction from the MAC, wanting the multi-party boathouse owners to be in compliance with the port's rules and regs. And to encourage that, their suggestion, which is embodied in your resolution, is a non-compliance fee of $250 per slip per month that would be effective 90 days after the adoption of Resolution 1330 if you do that today. And the sense was to send a very clear message to encourage them to be in compliance and to give them a significant cure period, to give them 3 months. There was also a sense, the last bullet up there is that the MAC didn't want this fee if somebody should just decide that that was kind of the cost of doing business and to write the check, but to not get in compliance. They really didn't want that. They really want folks to get into compliance. And so the last bullet there talks about that the fee would also trigger enforcement action up to and including eviction. I think that the legal term is unlawful detainer that we would use, but the sentiment from the MAC is clear. That concludes the presentation. Commission, there are a number of ways to skin this cat. There is no perfect way to do this. What is presented to you today is one option where people that spend their time down in the marinas came together at your request and tried to come up with a balanced solution that met the criteria that you set.
I'd like to make a comment, if I may. Mr. Stahl, you're standing at the right place for this comment. I've been to most of the MAC meetings, the Marine Advisory Committee meetings, over the years, and there have been some great ones, some real good things decided and discussed and so on. I think one of the best things that's happened with the MAC was forming this subcommittee to get people, a person from recreational boating and commercial fishing, and certainly our director, Dan, who I always have felt, since I've been on the commission, that the directors need to be more responsible for a lot of the decisions that are made. It seems like too often it falls on us up here at the board, and we know less about it than the people that are trained in those areas. You're trained in marine moorage rates, all kinds of things relative to harbors. And so I think when you took these ideas and spent hours and hours and hours contemplating what was going to be the best result and fair for everybody, that you came out with a good plan. And I think you deserve a tremendous amount of credit for being the leader of that pack, and it's nice to have your thoughts and the thoughts of the other folks on the committee thrown in and come up with a moorage plan that seems fairly reasonable. It's not perfect, and I don't think anybody would say it is, but to start over and tear it apart, I think is not the answer either. So I'm just want to tell you how proud I am of you and your committee, and I hope that those kinds of things can continue to happen at the port for many years, where you sit down with qualified people that have good experience in whatever area it may be, whether we're talking about environmental issues or moorage or whatever. But thanks very much.
Well, thank you for the kind words. It's easy to stand in this position when you have completed staff work and when you have a committee that has really taken ownership of this and really worked it hard. So the credit is back here. Thank you.
I'd like to comment as well. I'd rather have you three arm wrestle than the three of us over this, and Jim Kyle and Jim Young and Brian Pemberton. Brian, you ran wonderful meetings. Any board would love to have you run their meetings. I'm sure they were very organized, and you moved them along, and they were great. You know, it's part of my feeling as a commissioner watching what you folks did to just carte blanche vote in favor of it and not tweak it at all. On the other hand, as a commission, there's a couple tweaks I would like to suggest, but I want to make sure that none of you, the three of you, feel it's because you haven't done your job. All three of you did an excellent job. And Dan, I was at those meetings that you helped orchestrate, and they were really good. And I'm glad that MAC committee is there. It makes life much easier for the three commissioners here.
Did you have some tweaks?
I do. Do you?
No, I've got some questions, though.
You know, I think it would be advisable to go through it briefly again and let us make comments on anything that we have comments on, so that we're all talking about the same issue at the same time.
Given the number of questions I have, that might be advisable. Sure. Yeah, if you want to. Yeah.
So put your seatbelts on. I'm going to rewind this thing. Okay. Any questions on the Inner Harbor replacement? That was a big financial nut to crack, and we had three very analytical minds on the subcommittee working on it, and this is pretty straightforward. We got to this fairly quickly.
So the original number we were hearing a couple of months ago was about 45 million. Now we're looking at 50. What's the difference that it's been revised upward by 5 million? What's the difference?
I'm sorry. Say again, please.
The difference between 45 and 50
Dredging costs. So
dredging costs.
The ROM that we had was on the replacement of the existing docks as is. There was no allowance on there for dredging, and based on our Gate 3 experience, we put a 5 to that.
Okay.
That was the same question I had. So you bumped it because you would be dredging, and that'd be another $5 million.
Right, correct.
Okay.
I just want to caution everyone that we're talking about costs that are 10 years out here. So
Sure.
This is plus or minus 20%, if not more.
I'm okay on that. I just want to. We have a difference, right? And I'm sure it's going to shift one way or the other as we go forward.
Right.
So, go ahead and flip to the next slide.
So this is just a market set of the different flips. I think all of those were
Back to the replacement cost for a minute. You know, we need to get some money in the bank to do $50 million, and you'd like to have 10%. And it looks like, can you put the inner harbor replacement cost back up?
Be at 5.
That one. You know, that's going to get us about 3.2 million, and we really need probably 5 million. But it's a heck of a start, and I'm glad we've started it. I don't want to tweak it, but we're certainly going to need more sometime.
If you look at the blue line model, this new horizontal line, this capital replacement reserve, is meant to capture money specifically for this bond issue. There are other funds in the blue line model that are meant for capital projects, and it's anticipated that as we get closer to that project, number one, we're going to push it out as far as we can. We will be looking at other rates, other revenue sources, and those other line items will also be available holistically when we go after that bond. We're going to want to make the best story we can about having as much possible. So my point is that we'll be north of this 3.2 million when we get there. I mean, based on the assumptions that we would make right now. I agree with your point.
Thank you.
Can I go forward to the ACF?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So the first recommendation coming out of ACF was here for the vessels less than 80 feet. So this moorage class encompasses both the gillnetters and the seiners and probably some of the tenders. The lion's share of the fleet that uses Bellingham and Blaine.
Let's back up. You jumped right to the fishing. You went over the recreational boats. The only thing I wanted to point out on the recreational boat is the amount of increase that they've incurred over the last 4 years has been substantial, in some cases as high as 30%.
Especially for the larger boats, as we were going from a linear model to a square foot model.
Right.
To do that transition, the bigger boats with the wider beam allowance, we knew that they were going to take the lion's share of the increase, and they did.
Right, and they took a very healthy hit on that. And I just wanted to point that out, that was a big cost for the recreational folks.
Right. Okay, so I didn't back the slides up, so we're still on the first recommendation on the ACF. And it's twofold. To take the moorage requirements on ACF, you have to have fish tickets as current as 2 years as opposed to 3. Now that's going to cause a bunch of work for the staff because they're going to need to monitor and confirm that, but that's fine. And it will tend to, the thought is that it will keep assets available for the people that are actually doing the work. They've got the license, and they've got the current fish tickets, and they're doing the deal, which was the whole point of the ACF program.
I'd rather see one, but I don't have 1 year history, but I don't have a big heartburn with it, and I wouldn't want to make an adjustment for it.
I think, I appreciate that. And I think there's sometimes there's a lag in paperwork, and you'd hate to kick somebody out because something was slow from the agencies.
There's a question in the back.
I have a question, like, if you will not up the commercial fishermen, you pay the rate of recreational.
Correct.
That's right. That means no fisherman that has a privilege in a harbor, just active commercial fishermen.
Correct. And there are vessels that are in the harbor that were built as fishing vessels and used as fishing vessels for years, but if they don't have the license and they don't have the fish tickets, then those folks are at the rec rate, and that's a pretty steep increase.
And that is one of the highest in the whole West Coast for the fishermen, if it's not active.
If you're not active, correct.
And still the lowest for recreational in the region, in pretty much any aspect of the recreation.
Keep going. So this was for the greater than 80 feet. We don't have a whole lot of these vessels. This is really Gate 5 out on D-Dock. We've got a handful of these 96-foot slips out there. When we looked at the trend line here, it's really flat, and we are on the top end. This was a surprise to me. Let me get it right here. Apologies. So this is the greater than 80 feet. In the last 4 years, I've really had my sights set on Fisherman's Terminal as the competition, and I saw us significantly behind Fisherman's Terminal.
How many boats do we have that are over 80 feet? Fishing boats?
15? 10?
10, okay. Out of the 210 of them.
Yeah, we don't have that many of these larger vessels. And if you throw Fisherman's Terminal out, we're on the top end of that, and that was discussed at length with the committee. And so when you look at that coupled with the fact that these trend lines are really very flat, that's what led the subcommittee and the MAC to say, let's leave it flat for 2 years, but there needed to be some escalator. We needed to have some movement. That was the direction we heard you guys saying. And so late in the game, we got agreement to add 2% on the outer years. But definitely a hard-fought slide here, and meant to be a compromise position.
So this probably came up 4 years ago, but what was this an issue with the square footage as opposed to linear on the larger these larger boats?
Absolutely, because these vessels have a massive beam compared to, you know, a gill netter, and if we had not done the change that we did 4 years ago, and left, say, boat to boat, all of these big guys would be gone because our rates would have been just through the roof.
But they're still the highest of all the ACF boats. These are still the highest
even
rates.
with what we've done.
Yeah. And can you flip back one slide? So you're showing Fisherman's Terminal is significantly higher, but Fisherman's Terminal is something we don't have, and it's fresh water. And I don't know if I would pay that premium. I might, but it'd probably be more relevant to where I live rather than just a desire to put my boat in the fresh water.
That's probably the single biggest determination of where these guys tie up their boats.
Where they live. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Price is important, part of the dialogue, but where people live is a big deal.
So I'd like to keep an eye on this so that we can be responsive to a changing fleet, and I'm sure it would change very slowly, but this is something I think we should definitely watch because we are in the, I mean, obviously this slide shows we're on the very upper end of all for these larger vessels.
What we do on the staff level is, or what we've done traditionally is you gentlemen have passed a mortgage resolution that goes 4 years, and it sets projections for mortgage rates. Every year we do market surveys and we see, are we following where we thought we were going to be? And if for some reason we diverge from that, then through Rob, that gets to you guys, and we'll have some dialogue. So absolutely, we'll keep tabs on that.
All right, thanks for that.
Can you switch back to the recreational boat chart, the 4% increase. The page, the other one where you had the, wasn't there, didn't you have the one like you did on the?
So the slides are numbered. Is there a particular slide?
Let's see. The one that was similar to the, I thought you had one where it showed the 4% and he added,
So all of the market set slides that we have show both the current rate, competition, and then our 2015 rate.
I thought that was the next slide, no?
So, and this is for all of the vessel classes. Commissioner, is there a particular vessel length you were looking for?
no. That's all right. Go to the AC, go to slide 17. Please. Now, that is for the commercial fishing vessels for a 2% increase for 4 years in a row.
Correct.
Is what the recommendation is. And the one for that same one for the recreational boat is 4%.
Correct.
So we're raising the same boat, same size. We're raising one 4% and the fishing boat 2%.
Correct.
The thing that concerns me with this is a recreational boat right now that's 60 feet long pays $513 a month, or about $6,100 a year. And a fishing boat that's 60 feet long pays about $4,248 a year. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine. It's in the ballpark. What concerns me is as expenses go up and we have to raise prices, the last 4 years, the recreational boats received approximately average a 28% increase in their moorage rates, and the fishing boats received 0. And so now we're going to raise it 4% for the fishing boat. For the recreational boat, and 2% for the fishing boat. So if you look at that over a period of 8 years, the recreational boats went up 44%, and a fishing boat went up 8%. Now you think that fishing boat pays $4,248 a year, but if they're only here for 3 months, they're only paying $1,000, thereabouts. So to me, I would like to see that increase. Since there wasn't any in the last 4 years, I'd like to see the 4% across the board for both the recreational boater and the fishing boat. It doesn't put us that far out of the ballpark, and I put myself in the fishing fleet, the owner of a fishing boat, and these folks who've worked in these boats and paid their way through school, more power to them. I haven't found one person that's not for the fishing fleet in Whatcom County. But because you raise them 2% or 4% doesn't mean you're against the fishing fleet any more than you're against recreational boaters. It's a matter of economics, and I look at it more from a business standpoint than a political standpoint. From a business standpoint, I think right now the recreational boaters subsidize the fishing fleet by $100,000 a year, and a taxpayer subsidizes the fishing fleet by $50,000 a year. To me, that's enough. I can't see adding more to that, so I would like to make an amendment to this that they both be 4%.
Jim, you'd like to debate that?
Interesting. I guess my thoughts would be what I said comment earlier. I don't guess that would be my thoughts. That is my thoughts, and that is that if we have a subcommittee that has hashed this out and talked about it for all the hours they talked about it, and had people agree. I understand it was unanimous. Is that correct? If it was unanimous with representatives on the committee from recreational and commercial and so on, that I would have to go along with what was recommended.
So, notwithstanding, Dan, your point, I get that. I wouldn't be in favor of changing this particular rate and making it equal all across the board. I think you've heard me say this before. I look at these as two very different entities within the Port of Bellingham, and our support for the commercial fishermen, to me, goes back to a fundamental reason that ports exist in the first place. And supporting our primary industries in an effective way, in my mind, is more critical than supporting a recreational boating community. Now we have the ability to support a recreational boating community and give rates or provide rates that are very, very competitive within Puget Sound. But for me, again, the priority goes back to the primary industry. In this case, it's the commercial fishermen. So I wouldn't likely support a 4% increase for all boats.
I don't think it's a matter of who you support, because if you took that logic all the way through, if you raise the commercial boat to 4%, you're not supporting, or excuse me, the recreational boat 4%, you're not supporting recreational boaters. And so I just don't think it should cut that way. It's not a matter of not supporting the fishing fleet by going from 2% to 4%. It's a matter of 44% increase for recreational boaters and an 8% for fishing boaters, fishing boats over a 8-year period. But so I'm assuming both of you are not in favor of it.
No, I'm okay with these rates. I think they've been discussed.
If the record could just show that, I would appreciate it, that we discussed it and that was 2 to 1 or both.
I appreciate your remarks, but I just...
Thank you.
Continuing through the slides? We good?
No.
Continue?
I'm good.
Okay.
Any discussion on the greater than 80 feet?
Anything further on that one?
No.
Okay. Can you click back to that 2 back, please? 65%. So, transitional moorage, you've got a pretty good idea about what you want to, how you want to handle that. Has this been done in other ports with a similar situation?
Would you mind speaking up, please?
I will try. There's no volume. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Regarding the transitional moorage, we didn't do an extensive survey of other facilities. We just know in our own staff. Chris and Andy, our 2 harbor masters, talked at length. They're excited about this. We think that we'll be able to get some movement on the glacial wait list, which is good for the marine trades. It's good for our coffers, and it will get a number of those 40 to 50 foot slips out on Gate 5, some fresh blood, and we're really excited about this. Staff's going to have to work harder because you're going to have vessels moving around, but the peaks are different. Where the ACF guys are out fishing summer and fall, and it's offset from where we have the peak on the recreational side. So the harbor masters, or actually the transitional moorage is really Squalicum here. Chris is confident that he can hot bunk that and make it work. They're going to have to hustle more, and they're aware of that. But it uses the asset more intensively, and that's a good thing. So they're up for the challenge.
We've got, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've got approximately 80 recreational boats over 50 feet long that pay a non-refundable deposit of $50 every year to get on a waiting list. So we've got 80 of them waiting to come in that would pay top dollar. And now we've found a way to take care of maybe 15 of them in Blaine and 16 of them in Squalicum. Wow, I wish we had done that years ago. That's a lot of money, folks.
Well, and 4 years ago, we took 39. We took 39 slips out of ACF moorage and did 100% rec. And we did that to try to balance the model. We needed the money, and we were working through the MAC, and that was supported. So part of what you're seeing is that the port is managing the supply to try to equate to the demand. And we're trying to get that average occupancy up as high as we can get it, and everybody benefits.
That's 16 times $6,000 just in Squalicum. And boy, if that means a little more work for you, Chris, and for you, Andy, so be it. But that's wonderful. I think this is one of the best things that you guys on that MAC committee came up with. A way to go.
This is the gem that came out of that discussion, I would agree.
Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I've got some questions about our web blockers. In 2011, the ACF use was at 88%. It's now at 86%. Marine commercial was at 5.3%. It's gone up to 5.7, almost 5.8. The business license holders went from 1.8 to 2.06. I probably shouldn't go to the 100 because that's ridiculous. Marine use, 4.3%, has gone up to 4.5, and the non-marine use has gone from 0.4 to 1.7. So the active commercial fishermen usage within the web lockers has gone down by 2 points, whereas everybody else has gone up by various degrees. Can you explain what's going on there? Because Dan brought this point up, I think, at our last meeting, that there are fishermen waiting for web lockers, and yet we're leasing them to non-fishermen.
I don't have I haven't seen your data. I was trying to listen to it as you were
Sure.
rattling it off, and it felt pretty close. Do you have the number of uses, Commissioner?
I don't have the. It was from a 2011 presentation that Pam gave us. It was actually, it went to the MAC.
Yeah, I think there's a couple explanations there. One is, it's my understanding that the desirable, almost mandatory need for the commercial fishermen are the downstairs, the
Mhm.
first floor lockers. And I believe they're 100% ACF, the first floor lockers. Perhaps Terry Buzzard might be the only exception to that. And the upstairs lockers are predominantly used by commercial fishermen, but they're not the most desirable one. And I think that's where the other differences between they have occurred, Commissioner Collins, on the upstairs second floor lockers.
Well, I
I
think
would
that.
agree with that, and I'd also share with the commission, Chris Tibby, the harbor master, and Milan, and I walked the harbor the other day, and Milan, speaking for the CFA, has really gone out of his way to work with us, and I think that we'll be able to work through a number of web locker issues on the ground floor. I think there's more than one or two ground floor lockers that are not ACF, but it's not like there's a huge amount. So we're going to try and get through those with the existing rules and regs that we have, and the recommendations here just strengthen the harbor master's ability to use some discretion to see that those web lockers get in the hands of the people they were designed to serve, which is the ACF guys. We want to use those lockers as a way to induce people to bring their boat to Bellingham. So they do their haul out here, they buy their chandlery here, and they spend their money in Whatcom County.
Well, I've heard several numbers on how many web lockers are available. 51 was stuck in my mind, and then I heard much lower numbers than that.
The current wait list is 51.
It is 51.
We don't charge to be on the wait list. There are a number of people that are on the wait list that currently already have lockers, and that's why you'll see the language that was suggested in this resolution gives the harbor master some discretion that if you have somebody new, that say a ground level web locker turns over, it's open, and you've got 4 people on the wait list, and those first 4 already have a locker, but number 5 on the wait list doesn't have a locker, and if he could get a locker, he'd come here. This would give the harbor master that discretion to bypass the people that already have a locker and get it to the person that doesn't have one.
But that's not in the resolution in front of us today.
Dan,
That's
two,
in there someplace.
two
The last bullet on page 28. So we would put language into the rules and regs that would give the harbor master that discretion to do what I just described.
What I'm talking about, though, is the resolution we have in front of us today. Where's that included?
Yeah, it's on page 4, very
4.
top line. So it's section 5B, page 4.
You know what, Dan, a couple MAC meetings back, there was a guy named Zed Blue that stood up and spoke. My gosh, his remarks kept me awake at night. We have 50 people, we were told at the time, on the waiting list. And he had a 60-foot boat down at Westport. And we're all to bring the fishermen in. And he lived here, had to drive all the way down there to work in his boat. And he was going to spend $60,000 in the next month on repairs. And he would be here in Bellingham with his boat, spending that $60,000 if he could just get a damn web locker. And so I went over and went through all those web lockers. And this is 2 months ago. If the active fishermen really wanted this guy to really wanted these boats here and were really concerned, the 2% increase that guy would be offset by this guy if he could come into the harbor. And when we went through those web lockers, there are old cars, pool tables, hot tubs, pinball machines, household furniture, a man cave, a nice bar, cords of wood, massive amounts of junk. And we sit here and charge them 15 cents a foot. No wonder a guy's got 3 couches in there. I pay for the $90 that someone pays here would be $320 anywhere in Whatcom County to store your furnishings. So put me on that list for that web locker at your new 20 cents. I'll be down here in a flash. It just doesn't make sense.
Chris mentioned when he was talking about the outside gear that there's been an effort to tag gear that shouldn't be there, that either junk or derelict. And Chris was very kind of politically correct in how he described an active dialogue in his office. Staff has also gone through the web lockers, and so people know that the harbor staff is actively managing those assets, and it's going to be bumpy for a bit to get that straightened out.
When some guy says he's going to take it to the commission if he can't keep his hot tub in his web locker, we as a commission have to have the backbone to tell that guy, sorry, you're out. So that goes to my next tweak that I wanted to talk about. And if we could go to, where's the rates on web lockers? Here we go, slide 27. We're currently at 15 cents for 600 square feet, about 90 bucks. We're going to raise that a whopping 5 cents, or excuse me, yeah, 1 nickel.
Everybody goes up a nickel with this.
I'm going to keep my 3 couches there for the $4 it's going to cost to go up for that month. I'm sorry.
But if you have an ACF rate and you put couches in there, then one of 2 things is going to happen. You either need to get the couches out and have fishing gear in there, or if you keep your couches in there, then you go to the highest rate that's there. Okay, I love the fact that that's what's going to happen, but that's been the rule for the past 4 years, that the contract says only fishing gear to be stored in the lockers. We did a significant, some have called it a sweep, several years ago.
Right.
Well,
shortly after that sweep was when we had the boat fire over on Gate 3. And I apologize that we've been a little distracted and we have not enforced that as we should have. We've had turnover with the harbor masters.
So the last sweep was after the boat fire?
Before the boat fire.
Just before the boat fire. Well, we want to be competitive with Fisherman's Terminal down there. Everyone's using that, and that's why we're keeping the rates low. They're at 51 cents a foot for a web locker, and we're at 15 cents. So the next amendment I would like to make to this is to move it to a whopping 30 cents, which is 30% under Fisherman's Terminal that's supposedly the gold standard. So we're still, because I'm just afraid it's going to be too difficult for Chris and Andy to clean those web lockers out when it's that rate. And
Well, if it makes any difference, you're going up a nickel percentage-wise is what, 33%? For going from 15 to 20. I mean, that's a percentage.
It's $90 where the going rate's $300.
I'm just saying percentage-wise.
Yeah.
If you're looking at that.
Yeah, I want to go up 100% to a whopping $150 where everywhere else is $3. And you're on the waterfront, you've got a beautiful web locker.
I hear what you say, and I completely understand your business sense of that. And I'll tell you that this slide right here, we probably spent the most time on with that subcommittee. It was knockdown, drag out is maybe a little bit too strong. We worked hard to get a 4-year recommendation on web locker rates. And what we said to Captain Kyle was, we want to try to keep this unanimous so that we didn't bring a split decision from the subcommittee to the MAC or from the MAC here. We didn't want to bring, here's the majority rule and here's the minority opinion, and this is as far as we could get.
I just find it amazing that we want to be competitive with the Fisherman's Terminal on mortgage rates, but not on web locker rates. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Hang on a second, Dan. So I get your tongue-in-cheek comments, but maybe I can offer an alternative. If the issue is that we've got uses in the harbor, specifically in our web lockers, that we don't want, you can use a mechanism like changing the rates to something that would be unpalatable to a person that really didn't need the space. Or you can simply enforce a policy we already have at zero cost. And I would prefer enforcing the policy we already have. It doesn't change the rates on anybody, and it gets to the bottom line of what we really need, which is space available for the commercial fishermen, first and foremost, and then if space is available, it goes to other users, just like we're doing with the transitional mortgage out in the harbor now, or will be doing in the future. I wouldn't be at all in favor of raising them to 30 cents, certainly. No.
Another part of the discussion, just if I can share with you from the subcommittee, as we pushed for a 4-year projection and couldn't get there, was it's easy for, there was agreement from the subcommittee that the web lockers ought to be in the black. They should not be siphoning money out of the general fund for the marina, if you will. And it's easy for us to look back and get work orders and get capital expenses that we've already paid for, but the data gap that we had on really looking at this was going forward, that what staff committed to do was to work with the facilities department here and look at roofs, look at the rest of the electrical, look at siding, and try and get a better sense of what's the go forward on the web lockers, and to do the analysis to kind of do a P&L for the next 4 or 5 years on what the web locker looks like. And if those numbers indicate that we're in the red, then that would be an indication that we need to take another bite at this. If we show that we're in the black and we're throwing off cash, then maybe that alleviates some of your concerns. I'm not sure if it does. But it would be in another analysis that we currently don't have. And in the month that we've taken for the MAC to work through this, we didn't have the time to do that. But I would commit to you that that's part of our work plan for this next year.
I think what, excuse me, what Mike said about the two options that there would be, and that's cleaning out the locker or raising the rate, I think that it would be much more final with the community that the web lockers are not used for just storing your pool tables and palm trees or whatever you store, and that you just tell those people, see you later.
Well, how's it different when it reads right here that the only thing they permit is fishing? The only thing permitted in the web locker or storage of fishing gear and shall not be for any other purpose.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't worked too well.
Well, I know it needs to be. Dan was saying the boat fire, whatever, and whatever the reason may be.
And I agree. Obviously, you two are against it, so it's not going to pass, and we'll pass it as it is. But 2 months ago, when Zed Blue wanted a web locker, if we really wanted him here and we could control it, we would have gotten him a web locker. We didn't.
Yeah, but
we didn't.
I'm not going to argue with you. We haven't enforced that to the degree it needs to be enforced, and it just needs to be enforced. Period. And if we do that, I think we've made it clear to the community that we're not running a storage unit for I-5 or something. And that's my feelings anyway.
So I'm hearing a lot of agreement, but this particular one, I think we're going to be disagreeing on for quite some time today. So let me offer a question. Do you have any issues with the boathouse rates? Anything there?
No.
Dan, I don't think you.
With the boathouse, no,
Yeah.
I don't.
Okay. So how about I propose this, because I really want to dig into this web locker issue deeper than we're doing here, and I think we could spend a significant amount of time doing it. Can we set aside, because I think we're going to be supporting the work of the MAC on this one, can we set aside the web locker rate increase and have more discussion about that?
I think staff preference would be you pass it as is with the current increase in there and you revisit it and amend it in the future. You can do that at any time. If you decide it needs to be less, if you decide it needs to be more, you can do that in a month, 2 months, 2 years, whatever your preference is. But I think our preference is you pass the package as it is. That way we can get this in place and have our budgets done and everything properly.
It's not cut in stone.
I would rather pass it today because I've done all the work and already gone through the web lockers. I don't need to see anymore. I mean, my gosh, these guys have worked really hard. I would not want to put this off any longer.
I've been through the ones in Blaine, and I know that there's lots of.
Well, we would have to go against our own rules and reduce rates if we decided to change this 20 cents to 17 cents, because our rules do say we can't lower the rates.
Who's talking about lowering the rates?
Well, you can amend your own rules.
I know. Then we would have to go through that discussion as well. Well, would you gentlemen like to continue this conversation on this, or would you like to take a vote?
I'd like to take a vote on the whole package as presented.
too.
The two issues I had, those were the only two I had. But I do want to comment that there's a lot of good-looking web lockers, too. There's some fishermen out there that have beautiful web lockers. You go into them, and they're clean. They've got lots of good tools in there to do their job. So I don't want everyone to think that web lockers don't look good. Paul Burrell sitting here in the front row. He's got 2 web lockers in Blaine, and he works them hard, and they look good, and he keeps them clean. And so don't think everyone's that way. But when you have a waiting list of 50, it's a problem.
All right, then. Call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Thank you, Ken.
You're opposed to the...
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Stahl.
Thank you.
And let's move on to our presentations. Mr. Zank.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I've invited John Yarnish with URS up here to give us another presentation on the airport master plan on alternatives. But I will warn you, if he does go through this presentation twice, it's going to cost us twice as much. So anyway, I introduce John Yarnish.
I got the joke.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At least somebody.
No, this will be the 4th time for me. This is important.
Oh, sleeping again. Okay.
Well, good afternoon. We wanted to update you on this master plan. The last time we were here, we talked about the facility requirements and where we're standing there. And before I get started, I'll say that we will be presenting this same material to the public next Wednesday night to Boat Harbor and collecting their comments and input at that time. Every time I come here, I have to relearn how to do this. There we go. This slide just shows the master plan process and where we're at. As we said last time, we're now deeply into the identification and analysis, and I'm here with some preliminary recommendations, meaning they're a consultant's recommendation that we're going to take out to the public and get their input, get your input, and get the input of the Technical Advisory Committee before we finalize them and put them in a report. And what we've done is we've identified facility requirements And then we identified alternative ways to meet those requirements if there were any alternatives. We determined what the critical evaluation criteria are, compared and ranked the alternatives amongst one another, and then we selected the recommended action plan. Well, we haven't selected the recommended action plan yet. I'm here to talk about some of the preliminary results of that. Before we get too far into that, though, there were three categories of projects that came out of the facility requirements. The first was projects that we're going to term ongoing projects, and that's like the terminal area improvements. There's been a big investment, and that investment has a direction that it was intended to go, so we're considering that ongoing, as are the taxiway improvements and the improvements on the apron area out in front of the terminal. And the general aviation area decisions, a lot of the decisions that normally we would be looking at have been 10 years in the making to get permission to go out and develop some areas, so we didn't consider such things as abandoning that and going someplace else.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you. A lot of this seems to be things we've covered before. Is there anything specific new today or different than the last time we talked?
There's some recommendations we're making about which way to go.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just glancing through this quickly.
I saw your presentation of the boathouse, and we had one here. So if you want to just hit the highlights of what's different than the one that was here,
okay,
I'm all up for it.
Yeah, we can save you some time. Maybe.
Yeah. All right, on the terminal, we are recommending as consultants to continue to expand that building to the south. That's the way the newly opened terminal was designed to go. Everything flows in that direction. We have to look at a do nothing. We're saying that if you did nothing, the terminal, as demand increased, the terminal would just get more and more congested. So it's just good to make the plans. There was a talk about adding some gates to the north of the terminal, but you can't do that because the tail heights start to stick up into Part 77, create a safety issue. And in this master plan, any relocation of the terminal area to another part of the airport was just not considered. It's too cost prohibitive and goes against the grain of what's been done before. I'll skip this one and go right here and say this is really the ultimate layout, and this has some different information than you saw last time in terms of the restriping and the removement of pavements on taxiways Delta and Echo, as well as in Foxtrot. And then where the 7 new RON positions are being recommended. And I think we said this before, we're going to do this, it will require the relocation of air traffic control tower, GA, and the GA terminal and FIS facilities.
Quick question on that, John. So a lot of this is predicated on safety. Is the FAA more willing to move the air traffic control tower if we have an issue like this where we need to expand the parking for planes?
Yes, they are. Dan was working with the tower to get a safety study underway so that they understood what was coming up.
Would maybe, Dan, you might help too. Would this be maybe the driver of getting some interest in moving the air traffic control tower?
It may be one of the drivers, but initially the process is we have to look at the safety component, line of sight issues where we have non-visible area on the taxiways and runways. That's really the motivator to get the talk and the conversation going.
Okay. So that can there's something else pushing that besides just we need more safe places to park planes. Okay. Because this might take a while to get to. Yeah. Okay. And we'd like a new tower sooner than that.
Right. And in our master plan update, we talk about the capacity of the terminal and the potential timing of future expansion. It may not be until 2028.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, John.
But the question about the tower is when that would best be moved, and we've been talking to FAA and saying they really have to have a decision within 5 years of what they're going to be doing, or it starts to affect everything that's going to happen in the capital plan. So we're giving it a 5-year time frame, which means the FAA will probably deal with it in 7 to 10. GA area, we've already seen this. We didn't consider moving the GA area anywhere. Again, it's been 10 years getting permission to develop in these areas, and that some of those relocations and expansion needs to start happening right away. I think it was 2017. I'm trying to push through this and make sure I'm not repeating for you, but in the G area, the real issue is going to be staging and getting the wetland permits in order, and then how you're going to lay the hangars and the aircraft parking positions up there. And again, optimal development, the development that's going to create the most income for the airport and most usability for the GA is going to require that tower to be ultimately built. This is different. We looked at the locations for the tower, and we looked at 5 different alternatives there. One was to do nothing, one was to raise the cab, and then 3 different areas to relocate the tower to. And we looked at those based on what the FAA requires for a tower, and that's line of sight visibility. There's a thing called aircraft recognition ability, which is the further they are from the runway, the harder it is for them to tell what kind of airplane's coming, so that when they're looking out, they can't tell whether it's a large airplane or a small one. That's important. Again, it has to be compatible with the airspace. The height shouldn't intercept any of the Part 77 surfaces. Has to have utilities, both public and then FAA supplied utilities. And then there are environmental factors, compatibility with adjacent development, construction costs have to be considered. Our recommendation is to relocate to the north, which is up near the FedEx facility. There's a pond up there. That's a piece of property that's big enough for the tower and it's not required for other uses. The land's available. There'll be some environmental impact and environmental considerations have to be given to that site. But the ALP is going to reflect that location as the ultimate location for the tower. When the FAA gets involved and they start looking at it, they'll do their own analysis and make their own decisions as to the location and the height, but we can at least begin to direct them in that respect. The other ones are not recommended. The engine run-up area, there were 3. Do nothing. Move it to the east side, down near the bypass apron there, or to designate a new area on the west side. Again, what we're looking at here is you have to be accessible from the airfield, the runways and taxiways. You have to have equal access to airlines and FBO facilities. There are environmental factors to consider. There are noise impacts, and there are development costs. And we looked at this. We're making the recommendation to move it down to the end where the hold apron or the bypass taxiway apron is, and but before we do that, we'll need a more detailed design report that looks at the noise and the direction that the engines are going to be facing and how to mitigate that noise, because when the engines run up, they create noise for extended periods on the ground. And we want to make sure that wherever we put it, it's not increasing the noise that the neighbors are experiencing out there. And so far what we've been able to do is measure where the nearest house is, but that really doesn't help decide what people are going to hear.
In this discussion, did you have a conversation about a hush house? Because that did come up a couple of years ago, and you can't build one here on the preferred alternative, or the recommended alternative.
We did look at hush houses, and I think what we're saying here is at the time whenever this is going in, the noise study would lead to decisions about whether the natural terrain on the site that we're recommending would be enough or whether there'd be some structure that would need to go in there. If you look at the area that we're looking at, the topography is such that you could in your construction, you could have berms around it to hold the area in, or hold the noise in. They would be, natural berms. But we may be able to do it with that by doing that. If not, then we would have to consider a hush house.
Okay.
Or a ground run-up enclosure is what.
A ground run-up enclosure.
That's the new.
I will use that.
Hush house
Thank
was
you.
too easy, I guess. A hush house, I guess, has a roof, and ground run-up enclosure doesn't. So that's our recommendation on that. On the helicopter areas, I won't get too deeply involved. We looked at all the things the helicopters need, and the real answer here was to just build both of them. Build one near the ice facility and put one in the new GA development area. It's paint on pavement with a little bit of setbacks, and it strikes us that we would recommend putting one in both areas so that traffic can go places. The other things that there are no alternatives. There's no alternative to the instrument landing system on runway 34. We don't get to make the determination on the airport surveillance radar. FAA will. We know it would have to go on the west side because it has to be far removed, at least 1,500 feet from any other facility, just to do its job right. And also others, meaning larger groups, are going to decide on alternate access routes in and out of the airport, the Cope Road, the various proposals that are on the table for that. So the other thing that we've been doing is the noise evaluation. And as the first step, I want to explain what the noise evaluation is as part of the master plan. We develop I&M contours to use as a comparison of current situation to the situation that will occur 20 years from now, or is likely to occur 20 years from now, given the forecasts that we've had. We use the FAA's integrated noise model, and we establish DNL 65 dBE contours to serve as the threshold of significance. Once we do this, these are submitted to FAA, and that brings up step 2 of a noise evaluation process, and that is FAA determines whether there's a significant amount of noise and a significant change in the noise environment. So they'll compare the baseline, which in this case is 2011, to the 2031, and assess the relative change and make a decision in step 3 that could lead to step 3 on whether or not, in their mind, further noise study, they'll support further noise study. Preliminary discussions we've had with them are that they're likely to do that, but it's never a guarantee with FAA. But when they agree to that, then that's where you get into an in-depth study of things like flight tracks and the types of airplanes that are going to come and go. You get in and you analyze the land uses and determine possible mitigation actions for flight paths and aircraft types and where they're going to go. And then you make recommendations as to effective noise mitigation actions. So it's a logically driven and step-by-step process that says you first refine the work that we've done. For instance, in our public meetings, we've heard people who live near the airport say that they think the airplanes turn faster than the tower is talking about, or that they're leaving at a shallower angle. And in Part 150, we can go in and get measurements and people in the field to test that. You can't do that in the master plan, or I guess you could, but it's not as part of this master plan, and the FAA is not in favor of doing that at this point till they can look at things. After you get done with that, then you can put mitigation plan in place and start to look at that. So what we're showing you now is noise contours that we developed for the base case. And what you're looking at here are DNL 65 dB contours, or the exterior line, but we're also showing 70 as well as 75. And what the FAA's determination is anything within that 65 dB contour should be looked at and should be dealt with on some level, or at least is eligible to be dealt with, if the port and the landowner and the property owner come to terms on what the proper thing is. But what the proper thing would be determined in a Part 150 study. We did a windshield survey, as they say, where we drove out there once we developed these and we looked at what the buildings that were showing up on the map were. And based on that, there's now currently 13 residences within that 65 DNL zone. So 13 people live within that area. We weren't able to locate any schools, churches, libraries, or other what the FAA calls noise-sensitive facilities. Within that, 52 acres of that land is designated for light impact industrial development over the course of time. 3 acres are general commercial, but 13 acres are designated and allowed to be developed as urban residential. So that is where report, and the county and different people need to work to make sure that those 13 residences don't become 50 residences. And what we'll do at this point then is we're going to the public meeting to present this and explain what it is. Once we get through that, then we'll go back to the office and we'll develop the future contours and make the comparisons and work with FAA to produce that, and then be back and present that information to both the public and you at that point. And that's really where we're at, and what's left to do is finish the alternatives up, get the report written up, get it to FAA for their approval, go out and talk to the public about the noise issues as well as the recommendations, and then start to filter the comments into the final report and get it to FAA and move on to the next step. So that will answer some questions.
Do we know the name of the 13 residences? Are those the folks that have been complaining about noise at all?
I think we identified some specific homes.
You don't think so?
Yeah, I'm looking at the south end. I don't think any of those folks have ever come.
Any of the folks that
I don't either. That's why I asked the question. Thank you.
A lot of the people that have come to the meetings we know aren't in here because we had them put dots on a map one time, and they're further out than the 65. They'd be in a 60 or a 55 DNL.
So, John, you and I were sort of chatting earlier, and you said that this is a little bit slower process than the average process. Any thoughts on maybe how long it'll take to finish this up? I know it's probably going to be a guess.
Well, what we're doing now, Dan and I and Sylvia spend every Wednesday on the phone with FAA, bringing them up to speed on where we're at, talking to them on what we're going, asking them, for instance, the last time we had a public meeting, we brought a series of questions in front of FAA that was asked by the public, is what would it take to do this? We get their answer. So I think they're up to speed on us.
Okay.
What we're going to do is we're really working hard to get the alternative analysis into them now so that they can see that we've properly considered everything. And once they get that and approve it, then they'll approve some of the projects in terms of the RON spaces in front of the terminal once they see that they fit in the overall plan. But once they get that done, we'll be able to complete the airport layout plan package and get that to them because they'll need to review that, and that generally is a 90-day review period. So we're looking at best something in the early fall.
Okay. So it sounds like they're kind of getting caught up then.
Well, we think we have the FAA running
yes.
beside us right now.
Okay.
We think they're very well aware of what's going on in Bellingham. And if they're not, it's not because we're not telling them.
Any questions for John?
No. I don't have any.
Thanks for that, John.
All right, thank you.
I do have some questions for Dan about this, though. So I got a call from Red Brown, county councilman, about the new committee and sort of what the county council person's role would be on that. So I'm kind of digging through the comp plan, the county's comprehensive plan, to think, okay, so what would be interesting to a county councilman? And I've given three of you, and I think, Dan, you got a copy of this. Or, sorry, I didn't get Rob one. So this is the updated comprehensive plan as of February 2013 for the county, Whatcom County. And the first page is 210, then 211, and it skips. Their policies are set such, policy 2D-7 says incompatible uses are discouraged adjacent to public use airports, preserving safety and efficient use of these airports. Incompatible uses are land uses that are, and then they define them. One of them is could be impacted by airplane noise. Okay, so clearly they're paying attention to that, and of course accidents and safety and all that's in there. The next policy, requiring disclosure of potential airport noise impacts to people buying or obtaining a permit on property within 1 mile of a public use airport. And these policies are based on a book, the California Airport Land Use Planning Handbook from January 2002. Do we use this particular book?
That was a guideline that the county used for reference when establishing the land use plan, the comprehensive land use plan. It's a good guideline. I don't know, maybe Sylvia could talk a little bit more about the
based off this California group, and that's now the standard that's being used.
Okay.
That's the one that's referenced. I think it's in a lot of the state legislation refers back to.
So they'll catch up, because I know that the California rules are not altogether different, but different enough that it might be relevant that we have something more local.
The WashDOT rules are now in place.
Okay.
And we can work with the county as they update their comprehensive plan to make sure that their rules are compatible with that.
So that was a question I had. How do you coordinate that? Because they're going through the comprehensive plan update now. So how
I
are
would
you,
give
are you
Matt Ahmed a call. He and I actually wrote the county's land use compatibility ordinance back in the early, I don't even remember when it was, the end of the 90s. And Matt Ahmed wrote the original one, is working on the comp plan update, and I'm sure he'll work with us on it.
Okay, awesome. One other policy that I'll draw your attention to is 2U-12, and there was a zone evaluation of the feasibility of changing zoning from general commercial to light impact industrial in the UGA in the vicinity of the airport. Maybe Sylvia, you might know that. Does that ring a bell? So we'll be changing zoning from general commercial to light impact industrial around the airport in Bellingham's UGA.
I'm not aware of that proposal
Okay.
now, but we can talk to the county about that also. It sounds like maybe we need to have a follow-up meeting with the county to make sure as their comp plan updates, it stays compatible with the airport continued growth.
Okay. Okay. So I'll leave that there. But then one other question I've got, and this is more relevant to the noise issue, but I might need some help on this. On page 2-124, in the second paragraph, it discusses. Well, let me go back to that.
Can I make just a quick comment about your previous
Oh, yeah.
statement? So back in the 90s when we acquired the homes around the airport with the noise mitigation homes, there was an effort by the county to change the zoning for those homes in the properties that we did acquire, mainly on the north end. And I think that was the 3 acres that John referred to in the master plan presentation here. That was changed by the county to general commercial, and then there were some light industrial properties that were changed, I believe, from residential. And I think that was around 1995, 96, somewhere in that time
Okay.
frame.
And then my last question about this is that the county is looking at noise, and if you want to expand an airport operation, an existing airport operation, or create a new airport, the applicant, quote, shall map projected 55, 60, and 65 DNL noise contours. We don't do that, and FAA doesn't require anything less than the 65. Are we not? Does anybody know why 55? Sylvie, do you know anything about that? Because we've never ever discussed anything below 65, but the county says that.
Part of state law. Where did that come from, Matt Pascas?
No. This is page 2-125 in the county's comprehensive plan.
It specifically states for new operation
Or
potential new airport.
Yeah, and expanding airports. I'm just curious about what they consider these things to be. Obviously, what a new airport is, but I don't know what the county thinks is an expanding airport. And the whole reason
I
I
would
even
speculate that might be if the runway were to extend, or if there's any movement area that were to extend beyond the fence line or the existing facilities. That might be required then by the county. It is not required by the FAA. The FAA goes by the 65 DNL as their trigger point for additional noise studies.
My biggest issue on this is ensuring that the cities of Ferndale and Bellingham are all on the same page with the Port of Bellingham, especially in the county, I suppose, so that we're not, they don't do something that is going to create a bigger problem in the future, So anyway, thanks. I just want to share that with you guys because I'm not sure the comprehensive plan is fully reflective of kind of where we are and what we're doing. Yeah.
One of the things that the master plan does do is create a land use compatibility element that includes the high
traffic patterns exposed contours. There's been a lot of things the county uses, basically an overlay zone put over top of a zone underneath to protect the airport. And that will be one of the products of the traffic master.
Yeah, thanks, John. That's nice because I think I think there's kind of two sides to that. So it's protecting the airport because clearly we need to make sure the asset's functional and sustainable, but also protecting people that don't know what's going on from sort of themselves, I suppose, at times. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's only questions I have about that. We're going to move on to our regular agenda. Who's ready for that?
Ready.
All right. Thanks so much, John. Thanks, Stan, for that. And
Somebody had to leave, or what was the deal?
well, it's too late now. Dan was going to go to the ski to see dinner tonight.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Let's move on.
We're going to keep rolling.
You're going to bring the dinner here?
We'll call a taxi. We'll have it delivered in. It'll be takeout. All right. So our first action item.
A motion to approve the 2014 Bellingham International Airport tariff schedule effective June 1, 2014.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So our discussion today revolves around the airport tariff schedule. Over the past several years, the port's invested over $70 million in infrastructure and in facilities in support of the demand of the airport. Over that same time period, we have seen private enterprise crop up, specifically off-site airport parking lot operators, to the tune of 6 to 7. We've just recently had one parking lot operator discontinue service, but we still have 6 operators out there. And we also have the threat of an additional operator who has recently submitted an application to the county to construct a 1,200 stall parking lot right there at Airport Drive and Bakerview. Now, with that and the offsite airport, the additional offsite airport parking lot operators, it creates competition for the port. Competition to support the facility. And again, I'll remind the Commission that we've invested over $70 million in the last several years to bring the airport up to a standard that can support the demand. Now, these offsite airport parking lot operators derive their business solely from the existence of the airport. And currently, the total number of stalls that the port and the offsite operators have, the port has 2,790. The offsite operators have 1,131 for a total of 3,921 parking stalls. At a 60% occupancy level, this generates for the port about $5.9 million per year. For the off-site parking lot operators, it generates about $1.7 million per year, or $1.75 million per year. If a 1,200 stall parking lot was to be constructed at Airport Drive and Bakerview for the sole purpose of providing service to airport customers, the balance would shift from a 71% port stall count to a 29% and a 29% off-site parking lot stall count to a 60% stall count overall for the port and a 40% overall stall count for the off-site operators. Now, what that means in dollars is the port would continue to see a reduction at a 60% occupancy level. The port would only generate $5.3 million in revenue. I'm sorry, $5.38 million in revenue. And offsite operators would generate now $3.56 million in revenue. So the purpose of this tariff change and what staff is proposing is to more fairly compete with the off-site airport parking lot operators for this business. The proposal is that we reduce the Woodstone parking lot rate from $8 a day to $5 a day. Additionally, reduce the industrial park economy lot from $8 a day to $5 a day. Maintain the $12 a day rate in the main lot and maintain the $8 rate in Overflow A or Economy Lot A. Since we've raised the rates in the main lot, we have seen very little movement. So the occupancy level in the main lot remains somewhere around 72, 73%. The Economy Lot A with the $8 rate change, it was $9 about a month ago. We've seen little movement, but not a whole lot.
Movement up, Dan?
Movement to the other economy lots.
Moved up. The
No,
movement.
we actually reduced the rate in Economy Lot A last month.
And so there's been an increase in use of it?
Yes, an increase in, yes.
Moved
Yes,
up,
I'm
yes,
sorry.
thank you.
Yes. And we have gained some efficiencies with the operational component, being able to better manage B, C, A, B, and C. But again, the purpose of the rate reduction in staff's recommendation is to better compete with the off-site airport parking lot operators. So with that, I will open it up for discussion.
Just I'd like to add one quick thing here. If you're looking at the analysis that you have in front of you labeled off-site airport parking, it shows that kind of the middle and the bottom sections show the difference between an $8 economy B and economy C and a $5 economy B and economy C. It's a very conservative projection in that it doesn't show an increase in occupancy percentage if you go from $8 to $5. As Dan just indicated, we saw an increase in occupancy when we lowered Economy Lot A to $8. So it leads you to believe we will see an increase in occupancy when we go to $5. So while your initial take on this is, geez, we're going to leave $500,000 of revenue on the table, I actually believe we're going to capture more revenue because we'll be yielding higher with higher occupancy and a lower rate.
And we may see some shift from the main lot to the economy lot as well.
Yeah, so it all makes,
A couple things. One, if the off-site parking have about a little under 1,200 spaces now, and if a new one came on with 1,200 spaces, I would guess it would put a lot of those guys out of business because it's so much closer. But my concern is I believe in the free enterprise, and I'd love to have those guys be out there if they contributed to our cost of our airport a little bit. But if we can't get them to agree to any terms, I wholeheartedly agree, change the lot to $5.
Go for it, huh?
We are working on the rate structure, but currently they pay very little.
Right.
I think it's
$25 a month or something?
$25 a month.
Yeah.
So thanks, Dan. I think everybody here has heard me say what I've said before. So I prefer we had a symbiotic relationship with the private enterprise that's off airport. But today I'd like to ask you about, we still don't charge any fee to the hotel, motel courtesy operators. Is there any reason we don't? Not even the $25 a month.
Nothing, yeah.
We proposed a fee change for the hotel motel operators. I believe it was November last year, but the motion was tabled because that was one of the categories in addition to a fee increase for the offsite airport parking lot operators. That was part of that proposal.
That was all part of that.
Yeah.
Can we pull that out specifically and address that?
We can.
Wouldn't mind that if you guys were in favor.
I would.
Yeah, just a nominal fee, I suppose.
There's no reason there should be no fee.
Yeah.
I agree.
Anything further, gentlemen? No? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Dan.
A motion to approve a modification of lease with Seaview Yacht Service Fairhaven Incorporated, Seaview, located at Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Steve will have a very quick staff report for you this afternoon, but I wanted to recognize that Mr. Reese, the president of Seaview, is in our audience in the back there, so welcome to our meeting. I want the Commission to know that this request for compensation and consideration to Seaview is related to the rupture in the fire line at the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park. And while our leases are very clear that our tenants are required to insure against the risk of use on our property. So we do not actually have a contractual requirement to compensate Seaview, but I do believe we have an ethical requirement to compensate our tenant and to do the right thing. So Steve can answer any quick questions you may have, but it is a staff recommendation to ask the commission to approve this.
Thank you, Shirley. Thanks, Diane. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'll make this real quick. In May of 2007, Seaview entered into a lease with the former Patton Creek facility down at Favorite Marine Industrial Park. That included buildings 4 and 5 in the surrounding yard area. Then in April 2011, Seaview expanded from the north yard into building 6, whereas part of their leasehold at the Favorite Marine Industrial Park, into building 6 with a business plan to do a boat storage model. In that lease, there was a provision that allowed an early termination, and unfortunately, the business plan at this time did not work out for their operator to do that continued boat storage model. So the operator has given notice under the lease to terminate, and that would have been effective April 1. That's sort of the front end of this. Then, on February 18th of 2014, a 10-inch fire line main burst under a central portion of Seaview's Fairhaven yard and created some extensive damage. It created part of the yard unusable. Presently it's unusable. We are out at the same time right now. It just so happens, coincidentally, we are doing the main fire line replacement for that whole site this summer too. So. And then on top of that, there's repairs being made to the haul-out facility, also in the same 2014 construction period. So staff is proposing the following remedies to help relieve some of the final financial impact on the Seaview operation down at Fairhaven. The first one would be to reimburse Seaview Fairhaven for their out-of-pocket expenses for machinery use and labor costs associated with the direct and immediate need to deal with this busted fire line down there. That amount totals approximately $8,400. The second portion of this remedy proposed is a monthly rental deduction of approximately, well, it'll be about $1,153 a month beginning March 1st retroactively, and then continuing until the Seaview regains beneficial use of their whole yard. And then with the vacation of Building 6 and the need to supply some replacement yard because of the loss of the outdoor yard area, we're recommending a 4-month no rent period to continue with Seaview in Building 6. This, of course, is in turn for a release from Seaview Fairhaven for any future claims on the site. The financial side of this amount and breaks down to, as I mentioned, the $8,400 for the invoice for the machinery, time, and labor, $7,300 for reduced rent, and then the value on the 4-month rental period for Building 6 is about $38,000. So if you sum all that up, it's about $54,000.
How much, I'm sorry?
$54,000, Commissioner Jorgensen.
And we will continue to market Building 6. In fact, we have a for-lease sign. So it will give us an opportunity to market it while Seaview is using it.
How long do you determine, how long do you think it'll take to fix it?
We're hoping to be done by September 1 of this year.
No, it seems in order.
I'm in agreement with it.
Seems fair. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Steve.
Right, thank you.
You waved at us.
A motion to authorize the executive director to approve and sign an independent consultant computer services agreement and related documents with the Resource Group pending final legal agreement for a total of $282,357 plus applicable sales tax and a 25% contingency of $73,213.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Well, it's kind of fun to be up here and not talk about quarterly financials. The contract in front of you, when approved by legal, will allow us to convert and integrate our financial system software with work orders, marina management, and real estate software. This is what our current environment looks like. The center of that is the general ledger. The black arrows represent what is integrated now. The red arrows show manual hand-keyed transfer of information. The current marina system is a standalone system that produces a report at the end of the month, and it's hand-keyed by finance staff into the general ledger. Same thing with Ceridian payroll. We get a report from our outsourced payroll, and it's hand-keyed into the general ledger. Work order system is even a little bit worse. We do get a report monthly. This is our maintenance department. So if we see a wall in here that needs repair, maintenance comes in, does the work, maybe goes to hardware sales, purchase some spray texture or patches. That invoice is put into the work order system to track that, and then it's secondarily put into the accounts payable system. So it's multiple entries of the same data. And you can see how inefficient and untimely that would be. Oh, and I want to mention the real estate software at the bottom has no line whatsoever. It doesn't talk to the general ledger system at all. So when Commission approves, for example, a 5-year lease with annual increases, a piece of paper is filled out by the real estate staff, given to accounting. We input that data into our system, and then there is literally a card file with index cards to track the annual increases. And every month we go through that and make sure that we're tracking those increases. So again, very inefficient. The shortfalls, I kind of hit on this already. Customer service is a big one. Our vendors and customer history is insufficient. There's not enough capability for more detail. No automatic payment notification to vendors. And this is not a comprehensive list. This is just a snapshot of what we're dealing with. We send an EFT payment to, say, Dawson Construction, and there's no way for us to let them know that we sent the payment unless we do an email through Outlook, separate email. We cannot email an invoice to the customers unless we print it out on paper, scan it to ourselves, and then send an email. So there's no automatic emailing of invoices. If we had that, we could save paper, printer time, envelopes, postage, all of that.
Tamara, how old is this software? My QuickBooks does that.
How long?
I paid less than $200 for my QuickBooks, and I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We installed Springbrook software in 2005.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Financial reporting. The monthly financials that you get every month are downloaded to Excel, manipulated for format. So that takes time. Lots of room for error there as well. Timeliness. I talked about that. The monthly manual entry for marina, work order information. If you asked me today on May 20th what we've spent in maintenance in the marinas, I couldn't tell you. I have to wait till the end of the month to get that monthly report. Efficiency, I talked about double entry, talked about that manual card file. So this project really started several years ago, but we had some staff turnover and it was put on the back burner. So Bob Jenkins picked up the reins and ran with it, and we met several times with staff to talk about what are the shortfalls, what do you need to do your job better, and then Bob took those recommendations and put together a really detailed RFP. That went out in December, and we got responses late January. There were 6 respondents. 3 of those respondents were within our budget, so we chose to focus on those. And I think the good news is that all 3 of those recommended different software solutions. We put together a software selection team that made up across-the-board users just to make sure that we were addressing everybody's needs. We went through a selection process. Individually, we all went through them, and then we met as a group and went through the RFPs, making sure the requirements were met, making sure it was within budget. And then we asked those 3 vendors to demonstrate their proposed solution, to get everybody in here and show me what it can do, you know, ask questions. And then we did reference checks on the final two. So after that, the resource group was the clear choice. It was unanimous on the entire team. Their solution was really met all of our needs. Marty Scalacci and Brady Curtis are here from the resource group. And their company was founded in 1988. They're based in Renton, so a local Washington company. They are experts in Microsoft Dynamics GP, which is the product that they recommend. They're a gold certified partner, which is the highest certification Microsoft offers. They have over 200 clients, including the Seattle Seahawks, which should be good enough. Logos Bible Software and Goodwill just are the big ones that I was familiar with. They are client focused. They do systems integration, business analysis, classroom training. They have dedicated client managers. They put together user groups, and they have a local dedicated help desk.
Do they do other ports?
Other ports.
That's a big one.
That is the one. Thank you. Couldn't remember.
You didn't even need to mention the Seahawks then. I mean, come on.
Like the Seahawks. So like I mentioned, their proposed software solution is Microsoft Dynamics GP. And compare this slide with the one previous. So the bottom rectangle is all integrated. It all talks to each other. There's no double entry of information. There are no red lines, which means no manual keying of information. The marina management software, the purchase of the marina management software, I want to mention, is not included in their proposal. Staff will bring that a little bit later, but there is a component to integrate the choice into this. But it will, the marina management and Ceridian will act as an import-export rather than a report that's printed month-end and hand-keyed. I think that's what the improved performance, I could spend hours on this, but I won't. Customer service, we can automatically email customers their invoices. We can automatically notify vendors that we made a payment. There's better access to detail on accounts. We won't have to run multiple reports to get some information. Financial reporting. We can map the general ledger to the state BARS codes, which I have to do at the end of every year, state requirement. It'll eliminate the manual manipulation, and I think it'll reduce audit costs. We can run multi-year reports on large capital projects, which we cannot do now. Timeliness, it's all real time. So work orders, real time, daily interface with the marina transaction. So May 20th, what have we spent this month on maintenance? I can tell you. Efficiency, one common database eliminates multiple entries. Real estate interface eliminates the manual card file, as well as tracking insurance, tracking just everything real estate tracks. They've got a great real estate solution. And better, timely financial data can lead to better business decisions. It just behooves us to have a better system. So the timing and estimated costs. The estimated costs are a little front-loaded because that's when we actually purchase the software. Resource Group has identified 5 main phases of conversion and integration. The first one is the project initiation and analysis. That's where we purchase the software. They do a detailed analysis of our processes and what exactly we need. And then from that, they do the design. They configure the software, they test it, and then they install it. And then is the development phase. That's where they migrate the data and integrate all the components together. And then deployment is when we go live. And we're looking at January 15 once we get everything put together and actually hit the go live button. And that includes training and support, but we'll be doing that throughout the entire process. The operational phase is that month-end support. Once we're up and running, they make sure everything reconciles, refining the details. So our next steps is we're asking you to authorize the executive director to sign the contract once it's approved by legal. And in the action that we requested, there was a pretty large contingency. With software conversions, that's mainly for training and data migration. So once we get into it, we want to make sure that people are using the software the way that it's intended and the way that it is efficient, so we don't start doing these workarounds. And that is going to be a lot of training. So it'll depend on how staff works that. Data migration is how much detail, how much back-end detail do we want? Of course, all the balances will move forward, but a year of detail is going to cost a lot less than 10 years. So we'll have to manage that and see how much we think we need or want. And then if it's approved, we'll start moving forward. The resource group will begin phase 1, the analysis, with a tentative start date of early June 2014. They'll further define the requirements and business processes, like I mentioned, and they'll ensure that required infrastructure is in place. That's that SQL server. And they will develop a detailed project plan and finalize the project scope. So that's the plan moving forward.
How many folks did you have that answered the RFP?
6.
Just as a pretty quick question, I didn't look through the budget to see this answer. I'm sorry. The contingency, is that within the overall budget that was in the 2014?
Yep.
Okay, so the total set aside for that was about 260, I guess, or 360. 375. Okay. That's it. And Jim had to step out to the restroom, but he says he supports this. So.
Okay.
All right. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara.
Commissioners, I'm going to duck out, and I'm going to ask Fred Seeger to sit in for me, so I have to go do another meeting.
Thanks, Rob. It's a pleasure to meet you, fellas. Take care.
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute a consent decree with the Washington State Department of Ecology for the Cornwall Avenue landfill, pending no substantive changes to the draft consent decree.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The document that you have before you for consideration here today represents a number of things. First and foremost, I think it represents the culmination of over 20 years of environmental investigation, studies, report writing, evaluation of different alternatives, and so a lot of work has been done to get us to this point. And it also represents a milestone where we're transitioning from that type of work, which is all very important and has a lot of information, into a construction phase of work where we're actually going to be working towards the implementation of the Department of Ecology's selected cleanup action plan for the Cornwall Avenue landfill. But more specifically, it's actually this document has two main primary components. One is the consent decree, which is a legal document that I'm going to ask Frank to talk about here just in a little more detail here in a moment. And then the second part is the cleanup action plan, which is an exhibit to the consent decree, and that is defines the Department of Ecology's selected cleanup action for the site, and that is the cleanup that the parties to the consent decree are agreeing to implement once they sign on to the consent decree. So just for orientation here, I think we all know where the Cornwall Avenue landfill is, but just on the photo here it shows the landfill is located at the foot of Cornwall, adjacent to our port maintenance facility, and it's just it's not. You guys can see me. Oh, there it is. So this is the State Street and the South Bay Trail up here, and then this is the Cornwall Avenue landfill down at the foot of Cornwall. The consent decree, Frank, did you want to just talk briefly about the consent decree here?
So this is one of our sites that we're proceeding under the formal process of. One of our sites that we're proceeding under the formal process with the Department of Ecology. We have had a series of agreed orders to study the site. That is to create the remedial investigation feasibility study. Ecology's selected a remedy. The consent decree is the final settlement of our liability with the state. It is actually a document signed by all the parties, which will be the State of Washington, the Department of Natural Resources, the City of Bellingham, and the Port of Bellingham, and it'll be entered in Whatcom County Superior Court. It has attached to it a cleanup action plan, which then the port is obligated to undertake and complete in a timely fashion. The consent decree settles not only the state's liability on this site, in other words, the state's claim against the port, but it also serves to settle any other claims of any third parties against the port or the city or DNR with regard to this site. So it settles not only the state's claim, but everybody else's claims. The consent decree theoretically can be reopened. Ecology reserves their right to go to court if they find newly discovered pollutants that they were not aware of, or there's an imminent danger to the human health or the environment. In the history of the state of Washington, though, in these consent decrees, the state has never reopened a consent decree because they're pretty careful, along with Brian and Brian's consultants, in identifying the pollutants and identifying a remedy. So typically you won't see these reopened. So this satisfies the port's liability on this site.
Thanks, Frank. And just as a reminder here, these are considered currently draft documents. The Department of Ecology requested that all of the signatories go through the approval process prior to issuing them for public review and comment. So the consent decree and the cleanup action plan are considered draft documents. The City of Bellingham last night approved the mayor to execute the consent decree pending no substantive changes. The Department of Natural Resources has gone through their executive management process to have that same approval. The port or pending Port Commission approval. That would then allow the Department of Ecology to move forward with the public process for review and comment on these draft documents. So that we do anticipate would start in early June pending Commission approval. So just for a brief background on the site and what this cleanup action plan, so Frank talked about the consent decree, what the cleanup action plan is intending to do so that the Port Commission is aware of what we're signing up to do. It's very brief. The Commission packet had the full cleanup action plan in place, but I'll touch on the high points just to make sure that I'm describing it as thoroughly as possible. So the main issue that we're trying to address here at this site is the historic contamination associated with the operation of the city landfill from 1953 to 1965. And these photos show that all the garbage that was collected in Bellingham and businesses and residences from the people's backyard garbage cans were taken down to what was historically tide flats. And at the time, that was considered best management practices to dispose of the garbage on the tide flats and in Bellingham Bay and make land. And these photos kind of show that happening. And there was a significant amount of waste, almost 300,000 cubic yards of garbage that were disposed of in this location. And there's a number of contaminants that are associated with that, mostly metals, ammonia. There's some issues in groundwater, some PAHs and other constituents that will have to be addressed as part of this cleanup action.
Hey, Brian,
Yeah.
before you leave that slide, it's helpful that we have video of this meeting. It's come to my, I think, attention again that I'm not sure we're telling our story very well on this, and there's a lot of misinformation out in the world, and it's being actually at times presented to the public by other people in a public setting who are presenting information about this and characterizing this site as something it really isn't. So when you say municipal waste, what sort of things would you find in municipal waste in 1960? That's, I mean, you mentioned the metals. What kind of metals? What are the PAHs coming from? That sort of thing.
Right. The majority, and I'll show you here a slide here that shows kind of the footprint. I can talk about that in a little more detail if you like. But primarily, there's a variety of municipal waste. Would have been plastics, steering wheels, shoes, a lot of glass, metal that is rusting from washing machines, what have you. So we've assumed that the entire footprint of the landfill in and of itself is contaminated and impacted, and that has to be addressed through the cleanup. Then what the Department of Ecology has had us look at is how is that contamination being moved around, and what are the other receptors for that, and that's primarily through groundwater. So you look at groundwater and how you can protect the bay from contamination through groundwater. And so in that we found ammonia, magnesium, we have found some low-level VOCs or volatile organic compounds, that kind of thing. There are also low levels of PCBs and CPHs out in the sediment in the bay, and I'll talk about that in just a second here as well. But it's primarily typical what you'd find in any municipal waste landfill throughout Washington, and there's a number in Bellingham as well as then throughout Washington State.
Mm-hmm.
So as we moved onto the cleanup action plan, the Department of Ecology identified 3 main areas within the site that will be addressed, and they carved them up into these management units. There's Management Unit 1, which is identified in the green here, and that's the upland. That's all the land that is above ordinary high water mark. And then there's Management Unit 2, or MU2, which is in the darker blue, and that is the footprint. You can see this dashed line around here. That is the area where we found, we've observed municipal waste anywhere out below the surface water on the floor of Bellingham Bay. And then there's Management Unit 3, which is the lighter blue out here, and that is, there's no municipal waste that's been identified, but there are areas where we have low levels of PAHs and PCBs that have been identified in the sediment itself. And just as a note, this consent decree and cleanup action plan only applies to Management Unit 1 and 2, so the green and then the dark blue. The Department of Ecology is going through a revision to their cleanup, their sediment management standards and their cleanup levels for CPHs and PCBs, which we have in this Management Unit 3. So we have unknown cleanup levels for that area. So we've agreed with the Department of Ecology to go ahead and do the active cleanup on MU1 and 2, and then amend the consent decree in the future and the cleanup action plan once we've established what to do out for MU3.
Is that waste in area of MU3 moving at all?
No, we don't. No, we don't. The only issue with MU3 is that we haven't. They don't have a cleanup level to provide to us, so we can't sign off and settle our liability.
But there's nothing visible that's
right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The darker blue represents the only area where we've seen visible refuse on the floor of Bellingham Bay.
So MU3 is just bad things trapped in sediment,
yeah,
basically.
Yeah,
okay.
And it's at very low levels. We just don't have a cleanup level to apply to it, and we anticipate that will be a monitored natural recovery, but we haven't settled that, so we're just excluding it for the time being. And then this shows what our cleanup approach is, or what the Department of Ecology's selected cleanup action is. And I won't go into too much detail, and you can't read it here, but I'll just describe it. So in the green area, the management, the whole for the entire area for MU1 and 2, the cleanup is containment. So it is to keep it in place, keep it from migrating, and then treating groundwater before it impacts Bellingham Bay. So the green area shows a cap. It's a landfill cap that consists of multiple layers. It's a low permeability clay that's capped with a liner on top of that, and then sand and topsoil on top of that. So we will be reusing the material that's staged out there from our Gate 3 dredging project that was used as an interim action that's under those white tarps out there now. That does have low levels of dioxin and furans in that material, but that's a ubiquitous contaminant that's kind of everywhere, and it's at concentrations that you find it throughout urban areas, so it's not unexpected, and it wasn't part of a cleanup project. But that will be capped and contained, prevented from exposure. Then on the shoreline, that shoreline is exposed, and there's landfill that's being eroded away, so there is a stabilization component that involves armoring the shoreline to keep that from eroding, a sand filter that is below that to treat groundwater, and then that dark brown represents a thin layer cap that covers up the remaining portions of refuse that's exposed at the bottom of the bay. And there's on the bottom there, note that says there'll be a significant amount of site-specific engineering and design that will go into this next phase. So this is all the concept. The next phase of work is actually get engineers on board to actually implement that. There will be more public involvement, like I mentioned. The Ecology has established a June 2nd through July 2nd public comment period. They'll be announcing that here probably next week. They anticipate there'll be a public meeting at Bellingham's Public Library on June 5th. There'll be review and response to any comments that they receive. And if there are substantive changes, that if they miss something significant that's identified during the public comment period, we will have to come back to you to have approval for any substantive changes to this document. Then, as Frank mentioned, that'll be filed in Whatcom County Superior Court, and we'll move on to construction, design permitting and construction.
It's actually, Commissioners, an order of the court. So in order to change it, the court has to provide permission to change its order.
And just for a fiscal impact, as I noted on the action memo, the direct fiscal impact of this decision tonight is fairly limited. It's just there's identified that we will pay $13,000 of ecology oversight. And that's covered through an existing AIG policy or insurance policy. However, it also commits us to performing this project, which will come forward to you in a public works bidding process, which is a $9.1 million cleanup project. So that is a significant commitment, and we do have funding in place through the IIG fund or insurance policy, as well as existing MODCA grants, and then we have other interlocal agreements with the City of Bellingham and the Department of Natural Resources that cover other payments and in-kind contributions, such as no payments for environmental caps on state land, that kind of thing.
Is this already owned by the city?
Yes, it is. There's a, I can go back to this map here. I can show there's partially owned by the city. This line here denotes the inner harbor line, and everything on this back side is owned by the City of Bellingham. And then everything on the water side of that is state-owned land managed by the Department of Natural Resources.
And our agreement is we would clean it up.
Yeah, we have an interlocal agreement with, and Frank, if you want to jump in, but
You actually have to look in our arrangements with the city. We have two separate lines of agreement. One allocates environmental responsibility and who's going to clean things up, and we settled that with an interlocal agreement in 2005. And it involved the city paying the port some money for their share of these environmental liabilities. It went on the heels of us purchasing the AIG insurance product. So that's one aspect. Then we kind of set that aside, and then we've been trading or rationalizing property in the waterfront since then. But that doesn't change the basic understanding of the allocation of environmental liabilities, which took place in 2005.
I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
So just one, and this is goes back to that point on the bottom. So it looks like we can get the work going by 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Where the city's not going to be ready to build a park here in 2016. Is there some conversation happening about how long, while that land sits idle waiting for the park to be built, what happens in the meantime?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've actually, and I had this on a previous slide. I knew it was going to be a long meeting, so I tried to trim this down to be as concise as possible. But there's a lot of other work going on here in conjunction and in parallel to this. There's this cleanup work. It's part of the Waterfront District sub-area plan. And then the Cornwall Beach, what's currently referred to as the Cornwall Beach Park Master Plan, is all going on right now. So the Parks Department is master planning, so getting the idea of what they want for the uses down there, where they would want to have structures and that kind of general ideas. And I'm directly involved with that to make sure that these are coordinated. And we've talked about what they would want us to kind of hand over to them so they can construct what they want. And we're working with them directly on that. It kind of changes depending on the meeting and what we're seeing, but generally I think they're okay with us doing this cleanup, basically capping it and handing them a flat site that they can then go build on. Okay. So we're working with them, and once we get an engineer on board, we'll engage with that in a lot more detail.
Okay, cool. That's it for me. Jim?
Nope.
All right. Nope. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Motion authorizing the executive director to execute an amendment to the professional services agreement with Anchor QEA, adding $113,366 for a total authorized amount of $616,032 to complete the remedial investigation feasibility study, or RIFS, cleanup action plan, and consent decree at the I&J Waterway site.
Thanks, Diane. Commissioners, this is one of our 12 different MODCA cleanup sites that we're performing in Bellingham Bay. And this is one of our waterway sites, and it is a fairly significant and complicated one. But it's also one in a series of proposals that we've been bringing forward to you to add another chunk of budget to the consultant scope to let us wrap up the RIFS phase of these sites. The Department of Ecology has been really well motivated and working with us to get these sites moving along. Brian mentioned in the last project that it took us 20 years to get to the cleanup action plan on the Cornwall Avenue landfill. That's simply way too long. But at this point, the Department of Ecology is really helping move these projects forward through the decision-making process. One of the things that they're working with us on is trying to make the public process more efficient. So for some of the sites, we're taking a draft remedial investigation feasibility study and the draft cleanup action plan and draft consent decree as a package out to public comment in one point of time rather than sequentially. In some sites that works better. It allows the public to really see the final product. In this case, what we're asking the commission to do is add some scope to the consultant contract to allow us to finish the RIFS, and we're very close to being completed on this site, and also to add scope so that we can add those last two project components, the cleanup action plan and consent decree, to be able to bring that project forward as a package.
Thanks, Mike. That's it?
That's it.
Oh, that was quick.
That was easy.
Anything, Dan? Jim?
Nope.
Nothing? Nothing for me? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mike.
Commissioners.
Norm. You know, Norm, before you get up there, I got to say, I did check to make sure, is this the one that I said no to because I thought the price was crazy last time? Because I think I gave you last year. I know. Okay. This is the one, right? Okay. All right.
Authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Raz Construction Incorporated of Bellingham, Washington, for the Squalicum Outer Harbor Improvement Projects 2014 in the amount of $703,832.50, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $774,216. $774,216.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The project in front of you today is a combination of two separate capital projects. I'll briefly go through each of those. First one is Gate 5 C&D dock. This is replacing some wood whalers, frames, and miscellaneous other components to repair some deferred maintenance. You may remember that I think a few commission meetings ago, you approved a lumber package that is going to be implemented in this project. The second one is to install finger floats in the G East location on Gate 3, where the boathouse used to be. This will allow us to get that area back into a revenue mortgage generating location. It's been sitting idle since. It'll be 5 fingers, 5 piles, approximately 11 slips.
What size slips will these be?
They are 45 and 42 footers. So kind of in that niche of where we're looking to.
Not what we have the big demand for.
I would say that's right in the hard side of where the wait list is longest.
Oh, it's not 50 feet and longer?
No,
it said 40s to 48.
Part of the wait list is mid to upper 40s.
Oh, good. Oh, great.
So we're
Super.
Right about that area.
I thought it was 50 feet and longer. I'm sorry.
We did try to squeeze as much as we could out of that area.
Super.
To try and get to that wait list. I'll open it up to any questions.
Bid's a lot lower. That's
So,
any consolation.
I keep reading this, and I'm trying to put it in a context that I can understand. They're just, this is for project management. That's
No, that's the next item. This is for the contract.
I still don't know what they're doing. Like, I've read this like 4 times. I just reviewed it again. I still don't get it. I mean, I'm reading, but I still don't. I don't understand what they're doing. Can you describe what they do with this?
That's actually the next item on the agenda. This one's for the bid award.
Oh.
We're on item number 7, I think, is what.
I can speak to that as well if you'd like.
I'm on item 7.
Number 8.
This is number 7 here?
This is 7 we're on.
Yes.
8 explains.
Yeah, I'm on 7. Right?
Yeah, we're on 7.
Amendment 19?
No, that's item 8.
Oh, okay. We'll ask that question next. Somehow, see, I have the electronic version of me. I don't know if we're getting along here. Okay.
We'll install new concrete floats.
In that case, I'm going to shut up. And
Tyler?
do you guys have any questions on this one?
No.
No.
Right.
Okay. My apologies. All in favor? Aye. Sorry about that, Norm.
No problem. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you that question now. You're ready for it, right?
I'm ready
Okay.
for it.
Authorize the Executive Director to execute Amendment Number 19 to the Professional Services Agreement with Reed Middleton, Incorporated on the rebuild Gate 3 Laterals F&G project for construction support on the Gate 3G East open slip conversion project in the amount of $18,000 plus a contingency of $9,500 for a total authorized amount to $1,239,531.
Thank you, Diane. So this is a PSA amendment with Reed Middleton, number 19 of the list. They were originally contracted to do the design of the Gate 3 F&G project, which this Gate 3 or the G East area is right in the middle of. So this amendment is for construction support activities, which are going to cover submittal reviews, RFI responses, site visits, and also visits to the various manufacturers of the products. That's really what I have for that. Any questions?
$18,000 with a $9,000 contingency?
Yes. The contingency is reestablishing a previous contingency to this total project. So it's not necessarily for this.
Oh, the 9,000 isn't on the 18. It's on
the whole
It
work?
would be on the $1.2 million. Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was.
See, now that I'm on the same page as everybody else, what are they doing?
Reviewing contractor submittals, RFIs, approving the materials to be used on site, site visits, visits to the manufacturers, that type of thing.
Oh, okay.
They're doing that for $18,000.
Correct.
Yeah, the $1.2 million includes the construction that they'll do.
The $1.2 million is their entire contract,
The
which
whole thing,
included
yeah.
the F&G project before with the float replacements and the dredging. So this
Right.
is the final tail end of this contract with them.
Okay. We don't use those where I work, so it's a little bit different for me. Jimmy, got anything?
No, it seems
No?
clear enough.
Okay, all right.
You don't use what where you work?
Well, a lot of this would be done just by the general. That's why I don't quite understand but then I do understand, I was reading about this recently, and I can't recall what the person is called, but it's like an overseer of the project, but not the project manager. This is kind of what this is, right?
These are the people that did the design of
Yeah.
the floats, and
Yeah.
we just need them to make sure the shop drawings are right, that the design is being,
Yeah.
that the construction work is being built in accordance with the design. That's what the $18,000 is basically for. So they answer questions, technical questions, and respond to technical issues that we don't have the expertise for.
Right.
And they're the designers of record. They're the engineers of record.
That's up to Reed
Yeah.
Middleton.
Reed Middleton, right. And the reason that number is so high is because that last number, they did the original work at Gate 3, which was a multi-million-dollar project, and this is just the kind of the tail end of it is because of the boathouse fire.
Gotcha. All right. Anything further? Dan? No? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Norm.
A commission motion to approve and submit a zone schedule for foreign trade zone, FTZ number 129, to the U.S. Foreign Trade Zone Board and authorize future staff administrative changes to the schedule to meet board and zone user requirements.
Thank you, Diane, Commissioners. I don't have a PowerPoint show, so this won't take too long. A little chronology. So Foreign Trade Zone Act was approved by Congress in 1934 to improve U.S. competitiveness with foreign companies to maintain industry here. The port took advantage of the Foreign Trade Zone program in 1984. We created 3 foreign trade zones in the county. Essentially, very simply, foreign trade zone is treated like a foreign territory where a company can bring in imported products. If there's a tariff involved, they can do something to it or just warehouse it. If they re-export it, there's no duties paid. If it enters the U.S. territory, there may be a tariff, but it may be reduced. That's very simply, it's a competitive advantage for companies that do international trade. So we created the zones back then. We hadn't had a lot of activity. We had a zone administrator, or excuse me, operator up at the airport for a number of years, international market access. The Cherry Point the BP refinery Cherry Point uses a subzone. It's been very effective for them to save costs in their oil production processing process. About a year ago, we were thinking of ways to making our foreign trade zone program more competitive and usable and flexible, so we went through an alternative site framework and revamped our program. So now we have one countywide foreign trade zone, 129, and we removed some properties, but it importantly gives us the ability to add what's known as a usage-driven site. So if we have a company somewhere in Whatcom County and they think they would benefit from a foreign trade zone, we can activate that on their behalf more quickly and less costly. And this has been of interest lately. Dan's been fielding some inquiries at the shipping terminal from companies that might benefit from having that activated. So we have that in place. We also created a subzone in Blaine for TC Trading Company, and they do warehouse distribution, cold storage, and primarily serving the cruise ship industry. And they see the advantage of foreign trade zone to save those costs. We're working with them to finish that up to get activated and utilize it, but we're hopeful that that they're going to move to that next step. So what I'm bringing to you today is we're required to have a zone schedule by the Foreign Trade Zone Board. And we've had something that's very kind of antiquated, that mainly it sets up the rates that we can charge, and also it's a handbook for operators and users to know what the definitions are and the regulations requirements to operate in the foreign trade zone and give us some guidance. And the Foreign Trade Zone Board has asked us to put this together, and then asking for the Commission's approval if there's any subsequent tweaking on this. For example, the rates need to be readdressed. We have operating agreements, for example, TC Trading and the refinery that specify rates, but if for some reason the zone board says we need to reassess those, we'd like to be able to do that administratively.
There's two of them now?
Excuse me?
Two of them or three of them now?
Just two. And TC Trading's they haven't activated. They're not actually handling merchandise yet, but they're moving that direction. They see a lot of opportunities, real competitive advantage.
So this is the whole county?
Sorry?
This is the whole county?
Yeah, any company under the framework we're operating now, any business that would like to use the authority of a foreign trade zone, we can work with them to get it done.
Very cool. That it?
That's it. Any questions?
Mr. Ramos? Nope. Mr. Jorgensen? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Any new business, gentlemen?
No, bang the gavel.
Nope.
Nothing? Staff, anything you want to bring up? And since everybody left, all right, we're done. Thank you all.
It's nice to see that the cost per minute has gone down.